Instructions for accessing subtitles in a language other than English are included on our board meetings webpage as well as in the description below. Instrucciones para acceder a los subtítulos en un idioma que no sea el inglés se incluyen en nuestra página web de reuniones de la Junta, así como en la descripción a continuación.
Good evening and welcome to the Ross Valley School District Board of Trustees regular meeting. Today is February 28th and I am calling our meeting to order at 6:34. We have all 5 trustees present at our district office at 100 Shaw Drive in San Anselmo. We also have cabinet members present, Chris Carson, Marcy Trahan, and Eric Siebel. So our meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. There's about a 60-second delay. And the link to that is on our website. And the audio of our recording will be made available to the public within 72 hours after this meeting. So, first item we have is calling the meeting to order, and now we're going to move on to our Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So our next item is to adopt our agenda and the time allocations.
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second. Ryan?
Aye.
Shelley? Aye. Daniel?
Aye.
Chris? Aye. Rachel, aye. All right, so we have an agenda and time allocations, which means we get to move on to item C, which is our student presentation for today. And we have White Hill Middle School students here from their 7th grade science class.
I just want to say thank you so much for coming tonight. This is always the best part of any board meeting is when we get to have our students and our staff join us and talk about what you are all doing at school and in your classrooms and so on. So with this, turn it over to Principal John Baker.
Yeah. Good evening, trustees, Superintendent Trahan, and members of our community, including all these amazing teachers here tonight. We're excited for this opportunity to share a snapshot of our learning experiences happening at White Hill. Equity is at the center of our work, and last year and this year we've centered specifically around instructional equity. Instructional equity aims to provide every student with the transferable and high-level skills to succeed in high school and beyond. When we talk about high-level skills, I think about Bloom's taxonomy, and so those higher-order thinking skills like analysis and synthesis. And I've mentioned those because definitely tonight in the presentation you're going to see the students who are able to practice and learn those. Also, beliefs very much matter. There's a mountain of research that illustrates this, and I think about John Hattie's work in visible learning, which we're at now 132,000 studies with that meta-analysis that shows the power of beliefs. Our beliefs as educators and the power of collaboration, our beliefs about our students and what they can achieve, and this is why setting high standards is so important. And then ultimately, students' beliefs in their own power. And we want all students at White Hill to be confident, independent learners. So how do we do that? Our professional development this year really focused around teacher clarity, which is another one of those domains in John Hattie that shows a huge impact. Teacher clarity involves teachers being explicit about what students need to learn, how they'll learn it, and how they're going to demonstrate their learning. We've also created a system, really, Mary Claire, who couldn't be here tonight, the other co-principal because she's sick, inherited a super collaborative staff who are amazingly talented. And our job really was not to mess that up, but to carry that work forward and make explicit these moves that matter, what effective collaboration really looks like, these collaborative structures. And what that looks like are teachers working together to prioritize these high-level skills, share best practices, and then also obviously teach it and then implement assessments to see the extent to which their students have learned it. So we invited Ms. Coble and Mr. Obenshane, who are part of these learning teams, these collaborative structures, and one of our dynamic 7th grade science teachers to provide a glimpse of how we teach these high-level transferable skills. So turn it over to Mr. Obenshane and Ms. Coble.
All right.
Well, first off, thank you guys. Can we get the slides?
You guys can sit down if you would like to. You don't have to
Oh,
stand.
no, it's fine.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you're comfortable.
So first of all, thank you guys so much for having us and giving us the opportunity to share, but more importantly, for giving these 3 students an opportunity to kind of share some of the stuff that they've done. Kind of misleading. We are the 7th grade science teachers, but all 3 of these kids are 8th graders, and that's because the lesson that they're going to be speaking to we haven't yet done with our 7th graders. But I'm Miss Rowe. This is Miss Coble.
Hello.
We got Layla, we got Violet, and we got Dylan. So we're super excited to talk about science at Whitehill.
Yeah, okay. So first I'm going to talk about our work in our learning teams, which is what John was just discussing. As he was saying, what we've been doing this year in our learning teams together, Mr. O and I, is that we have been sitting down and kind of looking at our bigger assignments and making sure that they are tied to the standards that are like the most important. So we're not touching every single standard that's out there. We're trying to find the ones that are the most relevant, that's going to dig the deepest for our students. So we're looking at those bigger assignments, and we're kind of looking at how we're grading it, and we do a lot of rubrics so that the students can see beforehand how we want them to be graded or how they're going to be graded, so they can kind of see a clear picture of what standards they're going to hit and how we're going to kind of assess how they're doing in the class and with that project. And it also helps them to self-evaluate how they're doing throughout the process of the project that we're assigning them. And then also we can revisit, so if they look at the rubric and there's stuff that we notice that we miss with a lot of our students, we can then revisit and kind of reteach those concepts.
In addition to kind of focusing in on these standards, we wanted to kind of talk about what me and Kristen are really about in terms of like our core beliefs of science education. And absolutely the first thing is curiosity. And any of the influential scientists ever, the biggest strength that they have had has been their curiosity and the fact that they aren't well known because they were necessarily the smartest or the best at what they did or any of those things. They are able to have the impact they had because they were asking questions and they never stopped. And that's something, if you've ever gone to a high school, that kind of stops as kids get older. Kindergartners, they're great at asking questions. I love working with middle schoolers because for the most part they are as well. And so we really try to kind of foster that and allow students to be curious and really encourage that. We also try to focus on skills, things like making models, analyzing data. And then lastly, it's about people, right? And science is a tool that should be used to improve the lives of people all over the place. And so it's really important that we consider kind of people and everything that we do in science. One of the first lessons we do every year is have students imagine what a scientist looks like. And overwhelmingly they picture a older white male. And because for a lot of the history of science, particularly in Western science, that is the only person that was able to study science. And we have a very clear conversation about how it's not because that particular type of person is any smarter than anyone else. It's just because, unfortunately, for a very long time, science was not open to others. But today we're seeing more and more science is opening up, and now a middle school girl can have the dream of being on the science cabinet of the president. Shout out to Layla here. And so we really try to encourage them to think about people and include other perspectives when we can, which is what this big assignment's kind of all about. So.
All right, so I'm not going to read this because it's wordy and kind of boring, but basically what it kind of touches on what John was saying earlier is that this assignment, the Wolves in Yellowstone debate that we have them do together, it hits 3 of the 5 standards in our NGSS, the Next Generation Science Standards, that we think are the most important. So there's the analyzing and interpreting data. We make sure that they are able to look at evidence and construct an argument, and then they evaluate and they kind of do this whole debate and kind of figure out what the best option is for this particular assignment, which these 3 amazing students are going to talk about. All right, so this is our Wolves in Yellowstone. I'm not sure who's going first.
So in the 1900s, we kind of killed most of the wolves in America, and all of them in Yellowstone. And this wasn't really great for the ecosystem, particularly the elk were overpopulating a lot, which threw the whole ecosystem out of whack. And so in 1990, Fish and Wildlife Service planned to reintroduce wolves to Yellowstone to help to fix the ecosystem. And then they researched a bunch of different plan options and talked to many different people, and they picked 5 potential plans, which was wolf reintroduction, keep the wolves out, and reintroduce but completely monitor them, and some other ones that I don't remember.
And to prepare for the assignment, each student was given a role. Some of them were like rancher or a scientist or a tourist visiting or a homeowner living in the area. And they all needed to think about how wolves might affect their daily lives and ecosystem, and whether they thought wolves were a good or bad thing in their lives. And then they looked at the pros and cons of the 5 plans that Dylan just said. And they chose a plan they loved, a plan they were okay with, and the plan they wanted nothing to do with. And they made opening statements, arguments, and potential counterpoints for the town hall meeting.
Before the meeting, a group of students were chosen to be judges, and those judges before the meeting would do some deep research into each of those 5 plans to get a deep understanding of what those 5 plans were. And when the meeting happened, each of those groups, the homeowners, the ranchers, etc., they would each share their reasons and their opinions on which plan they wanted and what plan they didn't want. And after each group went and the judges spent a good amount of time acknowledging what they had said and getting a deep understanding about where they were coming from and what plan they said would affect them, they would talk to each other and come up with an idea of what plan they wanted and what they think would suit all the groups the best. And after that, only one plan out of all 5 plans would be chosen, and that would be that.
9 out of 10 times, we chose the same plan, apparently, which was the reintroduction of monitored/experimental wolves.
After the meeting, we looked at the data from Yellowstone, from the elk populations, wolf populations, and various different plant populations, and saw the impact wolves had on the ecosystem.
And actually reintroducing the wolves had a great impact on the ecosystem. It completely changed the ecosystem completely in the park. It brought healthy levels back. Elk population grew, beaver population grew, some plant species made a full recovery in the park. And as a student, it was actually really interesting to notice that and actually be like, wow, having one species brought back numbers of species and completely transformed something just by bringing in one animal.
All right. Any questions?
I have a question. So you're looking at science and you're looking at the benefits of reintroducing wolves and the data that supports that. How do you feel about taking that information and then having to rely on people to tell you what they want, which may not support the science? And I just want to get, and that's a broad question too, because we talk about science and what's good for the planet, for example, what's good for the ecosystem. And people say, well, I'm not going to stop using my air conditioner because I have an 80-year-old mother who needs to be cool and it's hurting the planet, but science says you shouldn't do it. How do you reconcile that as young scientists?
Well, we notice a lot that the ecosystem that we live in, for example, Marin, there's a lot of different parts of Marin that make it such an amazing place to live in. You know, we got the trees, there's open, we don't just put in a bunch of new houses everywhere. We keep open land for the animals because animals are important. So just looking at that and realizing where we live and seeing the impact of everything in Marin and how it's such a beautiful place because of it, I can kind of believe what happened in Yellowstone, like how all the species started going out and how the park was impacted greatly from that. Because I've learned from living here that we aren't the reason why this place is so beautiful. It's the trees, it's the birds, it's the water, it's the nature, it's the animals, it's everything. So, I don't know, that's kind of how I looked at that, if that's what you're asking.
That's really cool, yeah.
It's also a great real life practice. If you're in a conversation and someone doesn't agree with you, it's great practice to talk to them and see what their views on it are and like how it's different from yours.
And is it okay to have different views?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people in the world with a lot of different opinions. Not everyone's going to agree with you, so having a good understanding about where people come from, their point of view on that, like Violet said, it's a good lesson to learn, and it's a good trait to have for when you meet those people.
Absolutely.
Could you describe a little bit more about what the town hall experience was like? Did it all happen in one day? Was it over multiple days? The people who were the judges, did they make their decision in public in front of everybody listening to them, or did they go in another room? Could you describe a little bit about what that town hall experience was like when it came down to it?
So we all went to a different part of the classroom, each of our groups, and then the judges it happened all in one day. The judges presented each plan option, and then we debated it for a little bit, which in my class ended up debating the first one forever, and then like kind of glossing over all the other ones, because we had debated ourselves out. And the judges went into the hallway and decided the plan, and then came back in and announced it to the class.
Was it the same process?
Yeah, I was a judge actually, and like I said before that, I had to get a deep understanding of each of the 5 plans. And like Dylan said, the actual meeting took place in one day, but before that we had time in class to like go over it and hang out with our groups. Miss Coble put together groups, so we were with other people, socializing, getting a deeper understanding of what their opinions were and what they thought was best, and just talked and discussed, and all those days led up to that one meeting, so that's where everyone put in all their opinions.
I love this topic. It's something that's very personal to me because I followed this in real time and understood that when you remove the wolves, the elk got fat and lazy, and then the shrubs that they would eat down by the water were overgrazed, and how that changed the entire ecosystem. So I follow this. It's fascinating, but what I really loved, and I know about this, what I'm taking out of this, which is fascinating to me, is that you took a topic that is science-based and math-based, numbers and science, which is really the most important aspects of education in my view. We use it all the way to get to the moon. I mean, math and science actually matter. And then you talk about like the ecosystems and how they get out of whack, so you recognize the problem. But the most important thing that I took out of this that I want to remind you was the most exciting to me is that you took time to talk to each other. And that's where the magic lies, right? Because the rancher's going to tell you, I don't like the wolves because I like the cattle. And the homesteader's going to tell you, I don't like the wolves because I don't want to worry about my kid going to school. But you moved there because it was beautiful, so you might not have the reasons. Anyway, that's the magic sauce, right? Bringing people together, finding solutions to complex problems, and talking to each other so that you understand the other sides. And usually once everyone gets together and talks about all the sides, it's a lesson for every argument on the planet, and it's a lesson that we all need to work on. So I hope you would carry that out. And Dylan, I had a question for you. Are you a scout?
Yes.
What rank are you?
I am currently scout rank.
And did you work at Mencia or go there?
I've been to Mencia the past couple of years.
Good. I used to work there for 5 years. I got my Eagle Scout. I strongly encourage you to stick with scouting. It was one of the best things I ever did. And it was incredibly unpopular when I did it. It has served me so well. So I hope you stick with that. You should be proud of that. It's a great experience. Thanks. That was fantastic.
I also want to add on quickly to something that you said. That's also like, yes, half the project was about wolves and Yellowstone, and like the ecosystem, science, animals. But again, like you said, it was also part of that one skill about learning to talk with people and be patient with them and like learn that not everyone's gonna have the same opinion as you. And that's what these 2 teachers did a really great job at, is they made sure like during our actual meeting, they didn't talk, they didn't involve themselves in anything, they didn't say anything. They left it completely up to us, and kids having a full discussion like we are right now, but you guys are adults. So I thought that was really cool and it was really interesting.
Can I ask a question? So the plan that most often gets chosen, the reintroduction of experimental wolves, which is also the plan that got chosen in real life, why do you guys, after having gone through the assignment, having gone through the discussion, why is that the one that you think is the one that's chosen the most often, if you remember?
I think it's chosen the most because it makes the most people happy. It's like the biggest compromise for everyone, which is a big part in life.
It also had a little bit of what kind of everyone wanted, and if someone didn't want the wolves there, again, they're monitored, so if something did happen, they could report it, and then that wolf could be taken out or it could be dealt with. So in that case, there's some like kind of like cushioning or reassurance to those people who didn't agree with it.
By far the best part about this job.
Thank you. These presentations.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Thank you. All right, well, another part of our evening tonight is, you've already said your names and we know those, but can you introduce who brought you here tonight with you? Do you have a parent, a guardian, a friend, anybody with whom you may have, are they waiting outside or? You want to go first, Dylan?
My mom's outside.
She's outside. She want to be part of this and see you?
7th, 8th grade. varsity.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Or did you ask her to wait outside? Maybe, maybe not.
She said she was way outside.
All right. And Violet.
I just have Layla here.
Oh, both of you.
Yeah, we're
You brought
each other's.
All right.
Why is your mom not here?
I told her not to come.
7th, 8th grade, man, we get it.
Yeah, you're supposed to.
My mom's making potatoes right now.
So you gotta get home.
I know.
All right, right. And you know what I really appreciated too is what you all talked about, is talking about your teachers and how they led you through this and guided you through it, and they didn't step in and be kind of the person who is doing more of the work than you all were. So that was, I really got that out of that too, that they guided you through the learning and the process. And I have to say my background's middle school, and I absolutely love White Hill. I was there for 9 years as assistant principal, and middle schoolers are my most awesomely favorite age of students of any of the ages. And so having you here tonight is just, it's icing on the cake. It's fantastic. So thank you so much for coming. And then the other thing we do is we have a swirl gift card. Maybe on the way home, we stop at Swirl, but you gotta be hungry for those potatoes. Right? And then we'd also like to see if you guys do want to come, because you talked about being here and talking with adults. We're right now sitting behind tables, but do you want to come on up and see what it's like to be a trustee and sit here?
We also have to take pictures.
And we have to take pictures, and then you get your gift card. Yeah? All right, come on up.
Don't be shy. Oh, next year.
Not by the end of this year.
6th grade, oh, really?
Yeah, just stand up.
Next up is got meeting right after this.
You're going to sit in this chair, it's the president's chair.
Yeah, wait until after like 40 minutes. You're like, dude, you need to get out.
All right, David, we're gonna do instruction. Photo op, photo op.
That was a team question.
All that.
Where's the president's
All right,
gavel?
so
It's right there.
if you like to, teachers, come on up, and Mr. Baker, come on.
Give me a few minutes here.
Yeah, we'll give you, yeah. Make sure those chairs are pushed in.
Watch it.
Let's get you all front and center. Come on in.
Still a trip.
All right, there you go.
The gavel.
Got your gavel?
That's good.
Of course, that has it.
Don't make it printed. You are our future. Great job.
All right,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
All right, you want to call the meeting to order?
Did you guys use a gavel with your judging?
It was covered in mud.
No stepping on rocks.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Told them to make it. Hey, you guys
No,
did great.
just a spring.
Sounds fantastic.
I had kind of a flash because I remember hearing about your whole thing. I was like, oh, God.
Threw a rock and hit her in the face.
Oh, no.
You didn't let me get out, because the river.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O. Thank you, Ms. Coble, for being here tonight and for bringing your friends here with you too, your colleagues.
That's too funny.
No.
All right. One of my favorite parts of being a trustee is those presentations. So our next item is D, communication. Moving on. We have public comment regarding items not on the open session agenda. Per the Brown Act, the Board of Trustees is allowed to hear public comment on items both on and off the agenda for our regular meeting tonight. Please fill out a comment card if you are interested in speaking tonight on items either on or not on the agenda. For items that are on our agenda, public comments on items on the agenda will be heard at the time of each agendized topic. After the presentation and information for each agenda item and clarifying questions from the board, we'll go out for public comment before we bring the item back to the board for discussion. Once the public comment period is ended for each agenda item, no more comments will be taken and we'll proceed with the agenda.
Is there a way to encourage everybody to stick around for the rest of the project? Or is that Maybe I can say that after the public comments. Like, hey, I don't. Just encouraging to remain.
Yeah, I know just the next thing, but I was just waiting. A little hard to hear it. All right, so for items that are not on our agenda, public comments, as long as they're within our subject matter purview, will be heard when we reach this item, which is right now. Once public comment period has ended for items that are not on the agenda, no more comments will be taken and we'll proceed with the rest of the agenda. The Brown Act prohibits us from discussing or deliberating on topics that aren't on the published agenda. So we welcome your comments, and we're not in a position where we can answer direct questions from the public or engage with conversations during the board meetings, especially on non-agendized topics. So I just wanted to put that out there first. So we do have public comment right now on items that are not on the agenda. And Teresa, do we have any items or people?
It looks like it's all about item E2.
E2? Okay. So nothing for non-agenda. So if we don't have any public comments on items that are not on the agenda, which we don't, Teresa?
Not yet.
Okay. I'm going to move on to correspondence and communication to the board, item D2. And this is correspondence and communication with the board. There are a number of items there that have been attached. I think all of us have read them on the board here. So thank you out there for those who commented to us via email. The next item E is presentation and or action items. So we are on number 1, which is the governor's proposed 2024-25 budget update. And that is, I believe, Chris Carson.
Yes. Just a second. So thank you for the opportunity to discuss the governor's January budget proposal this evening. What we'll be doing is we'll be kind of looking at a budget timeline, governor's proposal, the impacts upon the district, as well as kind of what has happened to some of the districts within Marin County. First, when you look at our budget timelines, we basically have a new budget that is due every 3 months, and you'll see that here on this timeline. This is something that I try and show because it's a question that comes up quite often. And so we are going to be bringing our second interim budget report by the March 15th deadline to the next board meeting. But where we're at right now is looking at the first arrow in the middle that says the governor's January budget proposal. The governor has to provide a budget proposal for the following fiscal year by January 10th of each year. And that's what we'll be discussing this evening. You use that to then impact your second interim budget, then you end up with a revised budget from the governor. The governor does his changes to the budget that have happened at the state level, and that's due by 5/14. And then that influences your final budget, which is due by June 30th. And the state also has to adopt the budget by 6/15. There might be some differences between what we use in our final adopted budget versus what the state approves ultimately. And if that happens, we would have to do a revised 45-day budget. But then you start the whole cycle over again. And so it just kind of goes back to your September date for your closing of the books, first interim and second. So when we were looking at the governor's budget themes this year, the largest theme that came through was that there was a $37.9 billion shortfall. That's a really large number. You've been hearing about it a lot in the press. That was actually something different than what the Legislative Analyst's Office would come up with. The Legislative Analyst's Office, and we'll talk a little bit about them as we go through the presentation, they are an independent third party that reviews the state budgets. And they have economists that are internationally renowned. They do a really good job going through the state's budgets and taking a look at them and coming up with their own analysis. So that they did have a slightly different take on it. But in any case, the governor's proposal moving forward from January showed a $37.9 billion shortfall. What caused that? We had all of the rains last school year, last year, and what ended up happening was the governor pushed the deadline for the tax filings from April 15th into like October. And as a result, many taxpayers didn't file their taxes, didn't pay any taxes they may have owed, etc., until much later. And so as a result, the state was not fully aware of their fiscal situation last year when they closed their books. And so it created some fiscal issues. And you see that in this next slide. This next slide actually takes a look at the Legislative Analyst's Office, their estimates versus the governor's estimates versus what was provided in the adopted budget. And it looks at what they call the three big three taxes, which are your major tax sources for the state, which are personal income tax, corporate tax, and sales and use tax. And what you notice is the blue bars on each one of those is the adopted budget, and you'll notice a pretty significant decline in all of those. And that's what really has caused that $37 billion shortfall. So,
Chris, you talked about what caused the shortfall was the delay from weather-related activities. So a delay says that it keeps it coming, but what you're actually saying is that the shortfall is based on the miscalculations.
Correct. Okay. They're miscalculations at the state level because they were not seeing the financial data timely enough
to understand what the actual projection should be. Okay,
correct.
Just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here.
Yes.
Okay.
And I know you're going to get into it maybe later, but just as another highlight, because I was noticing that these three, the personal, the corporate, and the sales and use taxes doesn't have property tax on it. And I'm assuming that's because as a state-funded, like the LCFF state-funded district, we're getting the state's money is coming from these areas, not just property tax, correct? Is that where this?
The one difference between what they consider to be the big three and the property tax base for the most part is pretty steady.
Okay.
Because you're not going to see these massive swings in the property tax bases as you do with these, because with these three, these are impacted directly by the economy. And what the people think in terms of the economy and how they're spending. So, consumer confidence levels. This is a really interesting slide because what it does show is really the differences between the Legislative Analyst's Office and the governor's budget. And so what you do see is that the LAO has some pretty significant differences in their estimates back in December from the governor's. And we need to be aware that that does become a potential risk to the budget as we move forward. Because again, the LAO has many economists, and they're looking strictly at the data. And oftentimes with politicians, unfortunately, they are looking at politics when they're dealing with these things.
And when I went to Sacramento on February 14th, we met with the LAO, and he said already 6 weeks into this year, they're already significantly behind in what the governor's projecting for this year. So the early trends for this year are also equally poor.
Yes, and I actually have a slide where I provide some of that information. Access to the LAO's documents that just came out. So now, as we look at Proposition 98, Proposition 98 is the funding that it's the major source of funding for schools. That's where we get our dollars. And as we look at it, there has been some good news over the last few years. 19, 20, 21, 22, there were some significant dollars that came through. Oftentimes those dollars were coming, though, because districts were facing severe financial issues as a result of declining enrollment and attendance issues. And that directly related to COVID as well. And so what they were seeing is large drops in, this is something that happened here at Ross Valley, but it's something that also happened and impacted the entire state. As a state, we're now in declining enrollment. And what you're also seeing across the state is declining attendance rates. For example, the Ross Valley School District has had a traditional attendance rate of 96%, and our attendance rates right now are in the 94% range.
And what is that about a year in cut or like difference in dollars?
It could be the difference of 2% additional LCFF, local control funding formula revenues for the district. So it's a pretty significant amount.
But like, what's a dollar amount? Like $1 million, $2?
It's generally on about $18 million. So
2% revenue?
2% of $18 million.
2% of $18 million.
Roughly. So it's a fairly significant amount. So.
And that's just in the average daily attendance that we're seeing today.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. So those are some of the things that have happened. And what they did is as a result of seeing those things, they did the 3-year averaging for your attendance. If you were in deep decline, they made it so that you would take the average of your prior 3 years instead of looking at your current year attendance. Or prior.
Is there any way you guys can speak up? We're having a really hard time hearing in the back.
I'm trying.
Turn this up. Thank you for letting us know.
So one of the things that I read was that the governor is proposing something to help the bleeding on the attendance deficit. Is that correct? Specifically allowing for kids that are constantly absent to have the choices to make up that time elsewhere. And I'm not sure if that's something that's been equated to help with the bad news of that.
That is something that they're proposing. They haven't flushed it out completely, but it would be something like a Saturday school for those that are not.
And then you would need to pay staff to staff it.
Exactly. So I'm thinking that the offset, it still creates another form of money and maintenance to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that is something that is out there. And I wasn't getting into the specifics of the plan yet. And part of the reason I didn't is because the governor was actually really light on specifics. It was really unusual, this budget, and the LAO, I'll talk about that in a minute. So there were also some bad news with this particular budget. Obviously, we have the large tax shortfalls. Oops, I'm trying to do it on my computer and it's not working.
Can you please speak up? We really can't hear you.
So the other thing, as you're looking at the Prop 98, with the Proposition 98 being the governor facing a large deficit, a shortfall, he should have gone back and proposed reductions in the Proposition 98 base. And what he's done is created finance gimmick to be able to keep our Prop 98 bases, our LCFF funds at the same levels, rather than decreasing those bases in line with the way the revenues came in, which is what he would have done normally. The reason he hasn't done that, though, is because one of the fiscal years that was in question was we've already closed the books and everybody has changed their.
Thank you.
It won't change because that's not.
I don't think that's
a microphone. That's just for recording.
They go to YouTube. YouTube
YouTube can hear us better.
It will.
Now? Okay, good.
As loud as I try, I have a soft voice.
You are.
And so what you would have normally seen, what you would have normally seen is a reduction in the Prop 98 base. But because we had already closed out the 22-23 school year, and we're already halfway through the 23-24 school year, the governor, even though what has been termed finance gimmicks, he did this really to save Proposition 98 and education. And so looking at this, what you do see, this particular slide shows basically an $8 billion increase in the base because of that gimmicks. And what you would have normally seen is a reduction down from 107 down to 98. And that would have been really devastating on K-12 education. And so it's important to keep that in mind in those gimmicks. I'm trying to do it on my computer again. Another way that the governor has really stepped up and tried to hold districts harmless is he's dipped into what they call the PSSA account, which is the rainy day fund. Basically, it's the savings fund that they've been setting up from K-12 education for times just like this. And what you can see here are the dollars, $5.7 billion being spread out roughly to these various years. And that's how he's going to help to soften the blow. And then some things that are not in the budget proposal from the governor. And these are some really big ones. So these are some good things for education, at least right now. Even though we've had some really large issues with the state with the $37 billion shortfall, the governor has not proposed a cut to the Prop 98 base. The other thing that he's done is he has not proposed state deferrals. And again, state deferrals are, I likened them to the wimpy syndrome. I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. Basically what they do is they tell you, we're going to give you the money, but we're not going to give it to you until the next fiscal year. And so it becomes a large cash flow issue. And so the governor has not done that in his budget proposal. The other thing that the governor has not done in his proposal is he has not swept any balances that are left over in any programs, because that does happen. They'll come in, and if you had carryovers, they're gone now because the state needs them for their own cash flow purposes. And then going back to...
But these are things that haven't been done, but could.
Could be.
Okay.
And I was actually going to get to that right now. That's a great point.
I saw that ...
Yeah, and it actually goes back to Daniel's point. The LAO just came out with some new information, and both of these were published on the 15th of February, and I've got links in here to the actual documents. And the first one, Proposition 98 in K-12 funding, that one actually shows, it talks about specifically, Daniel, what you were mentioning, that the state taxes are coming in lower than even projected in the January proposal. And they're already 7.7 billion in a 3-year look short. So it's pretty significant. And then the other document then talks at great length about the governor's gimmicks in Prop 98. And in essence, what they're proposing is that the legislature and the governor don't do that, don't do those gimmicks to save Prop 98, to go ahead and decrease the base because it has greater implications into the future. Because as you remember, Proposition 98 is a staircase. And so if you have a higher ceiling than you should, then it will forever change how much in those out years. So what the LAO is saying, don't do that. Look at all those things that I just said, the deferrals and things of that nature, sweeps. And they actually had put out within their own initial document in December, they had put out the information, kind of some of their own ideas on where they could go for these cuts. And the LAO is not saying harm education, they're still saying to, as much as you can, hold it as harmless as you can, but to use these other things that they've done in the past to get those dollars and reduce your Prop 98 base. So that's what the LAO is coming out with. And so I guess in a nutshell, what I'm really saying is that the governor's budget proposal could get a lot worse. Could get a lot worse? It could get a lot worse as we move forward. And in fact, you're starting to hear that, some of those whispers as we look forward.
So Ken did say that with the LAO, it might not be in writing, but he said a $30 billion deficit each year for the next 3 years. And he said the budget is unsustainable over the next 5 years. This is what he verbally said to us when we went to Sacramento.
And none of that surprises me. And what that doesn't get into is, even though you have a cost of living adjustment that they say that you're going to receive, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to receive it. They can deficit those COLAs, and they have in the past, and they even threatened to give us zero COLA or negative COLA during COVID. They ended up at a zero, but it was fully deficited. They have since paid that back, but in any case, so that really has to do with the statewide budget. Kind of looking at our impacts. When looking at everything, I know this is a slide that I've shown in the past, and it had to do with state aid versus community funded. As I'm looking at my second interim budget, we're actually going to we're projecting to go back into community, or go into community funded for 24-25. And a lot of that has to do with our change in funded attendance, which we'll show in a minute. We're showing a pretty significant drop in our funded attendance. You have a really low COLA that's projected, 0.76. And our property tax base right now is estimated to be a 3.56% increase. So as a result, we would go into community aid funding status in 24-25. Now, here's the bad news with that. We would also flip out in 25-26.
To go back
into state aid. So as we actually look at our cost of living adjustments, our change in funded average daily attendance, and then taking a look at what the impacts are upon the district's local control funding formula and our parcel tax revenues. These are what we are at right now for 23-24, 24-25, and 25-26. Now keep in mind that under AB 1200, I am required to do a 3-year multi-year projection for every budget. And we're required to provide our funding status, whether we are a positive funded status, qualified funded status, or negative funded status. And that's for every budget cycle. Now what those mean are, positive means that I can afford all of our expenses for the current year, the second year, and the third year of our multi-year projections. Qualified means I may not be able to afford those expenses. And negative means I will not be able to, short of having some very serious budget cuts. And so as you look at this, what really stands out is next year we still have a change in funded average daily attendance drop of minus 6.16%. And then we finally start to go up just a little bit in 25-26. That's when we're fully implemented with transitional kindergarten expansion. That's part of the reason you're seeing the reason you're still seeing negative changes in funded average daily attendance is a few moments ago I was talking about the 3-year average smoothing that the governor had given us during the COVID period because of everybody's drop in enrollment and attendance percentages. That's still the end of, we're still seeing the impacts, the positive impacts upon the district in those, in the 23-24, and then we would in the 24-25 in terms of our funded average daily attendance. Yes. Then the other thing that's really key is as you look at what our local control funding formula revenues, LCFF revenues are, as well as what our parcel tax revenues, those are the two funding sources that we utilize to pay for our pay for staff, all staff. So those are the key numbers to look at. And as you look at it, 23-24, we have 24,048,000. Then we expect to go to 24,158,000 the following year, and then 24,004,000 in 25-26. Even with going into community funded status next year, it's just a really slight increase of 0.46% increase in revenues. In 25-26, when we pop back out of community funded status back into state aid, we actually would see a slight decrease in our revenues. But more or less what the district is expected to see in terms of revenues is pretty flat between 23-24 and 25-26. So.
Now I'll ask my question. It's my understanding that our district is only one of 3 districts in the county that are currently state backfill funded, and all the rest of the districts, like us, Centerville, and Novato, and then the rest of the districts are fully funded by just their property tax revenue.
And there are 2 other districts that can flip in and out as well.
Okay.
It just depends upon the year. Those 2 districts are Miller Creek and Blacksburg-Cortondera at times will.
They kind of do the flip-floppy thing as well, but all the rest of the districts have a little bit more stability because they're fully property tax funded. Correct. Not the state aid backfill funded.
Correct. Okay. And kind of going back to your question earlier about property taxes, again, property taxes, you may not see the large swings, but what ends up happening is it's a more steady source of income for districts. And then the other thing that I really want to stress is that the 23-24, if you look, despite us being given a cost of living adjustment COLA of 8.22%, because we saw a large drop in our funded average daily attendance, our actual total LCFF revenues and parcel tax revenues income is only 2.65% higher in 23-24 than 22-23. And so we have a limited source of income in the current year as well. So then what's really important is to kind of look at what other districts have done as well, because that's one of the measures that we look at as well. So in the last school year, Miller Creek did a tentative agreement, and what that tentative agreement was 13% over 2 years. It was 8% last school year and 5% in the current school year. For the budget adoption in 23-24, Miller Creek was given a letter from the County Office of Education, and MCOE's adopted budget letter stated the following. I'm going to read it because it's important. The district's first interim report will therefore need to be accompanied by a board-approved resolution identifying the size of the structural deficit and the process and timeline for the district to develop a deficit reduction and reserve restoration plan. Now, at first interim, they had a positive budget, meaning that they can meet their budget expenses. But they also had to provide a resolution, which you see there as well, which states that the size of their deficit is $1.2 million, and they're going to have to work towards making $1.2 million in cuts in order to afford the budget that they have, along with the 8% and 5%.
So they're making those cuts this year?
They'll be making them probably a combination of the current year and next year.
They just have to determine what they're going to be.
Yeah. And they have to actually start making them.
So before they gave the 8 and 5% for those 2 years, they had a positive budget?
They had a positive. San Rafael City Schools last year gave 15% over 2 years, and it was kind of a mix, and we'll get into the percentages, but right now they're in the middle of a $5.85 million budget cut that they need to make. And this article was from February 13th, so this is recent.
So they gave a 11% 22-23, a 4% 23-24, and because of that, they're at 15, and now have to make $5,850,000 in cuts based on that decision.
Correct.
But we can't just say that because the 15% pay increase in San Rafael led to almost a $6 million budget cuts, right?
The single largest source of expenses in any school district budget is salaries and benefits. So I would directly line it, and we'll go through what it would look like with us. Sausalito Marin in October gave 13.6% over a 3-year period. So that was October. Their December first interim budget, they were actually qualified, meaning they may not meet their financial expenses. And they just went through and did $1.4 million in cuts that they're
and they're rezoning some of their schools, I think I read this week.
And that's part of the process.
Where were the cuts that they made?
They were all over. It came across the board. They listed it in the article. It came down to some.
They're restructuring schools, and so they're laying off a principal, a couple of teachers, an office administrative assistant type person, aides and things like that. In part of that, their budget cuts is what I read.
Are there other things besides personnel that can be reduced that aren't necessarily teachers and administration?
You can, but your ability to make those cuts become greatly reduced just because of the nature of the types of things that are in there.
Spend money on it.
Yeah. Again, that's the reason that salary and benefits end up being the single largest source of expenses in any school district. And again, Sausalito Marin actually was qualified in their budget. So Novato gave 13.26% last year. And they are also at first interim a qualified budget. And if you look at their multi-year projections, they actually need to cut $4 million out of their budget.
How do they do that if they've already committed that?
Those are for 24-25, so some of those are positions. Some of those, in reading their information, some of it had to do with not laying off positions that the one-time funds went away. So that's part of what they're doing. And then I don't think they've announced all of their expenses that they're going to cut. But again, they have a qualified budget, so it's a pretty severe financial situation. So kind of to summarize what we were looking at, in 22-23, Miller Creek gave 8%, 23-24 they gave 5%, and then they gave a combined 13%. They are not qualified. They are a positive budget certification, but they do need to make $1.2 million in cuts. San Rafael City Schools, they gave the 15% over 2 years, and the way it broke down is it was 8% July 1st, 2022. It was 3% July 1st, 2023, and then 4% in the current year. And so it ends up being 11 and 4 as you look at it. And they have to make 5.85% million in cuts, and their budget is not qualified either. They're a positive budget certification. Then you start looking at two other districts, Sausalito, Marin. And I have 13 there. I think it was 13.6. But it broke down to 4%, 5% in 22, 23, 23, 24, and then 4% 24, 25. But they also are qualified budget and 1.4 million. And then as you look, Novato Unified, their budget or their salary settlement was 13.26. It was just 1 year, and they have the $4 million. As you start looking at it, the averages for the districts for 22-23 for the 4 districts was 9.07%, and last year we gave to our staff the 10.44. In 23-24, the average, and it says 4 districts, but it's really the 3 because I didn't include Novato, is 4.67, and our proposal, as it was 2.83%. And so looking at the combined average of the 3 districts, it was 12.33%, and ours was 13.27. And so, those are just the districts that have shown some financial struggles. That's why I've included them. And so you can kind of see where our proposals have been versus those. And so
Chris, with enrollment relatively flat, right? Maybe it's 5 students here, there, right? That's how we get our funding. More students equal more revenue, in theory. And that's flat, and we've had more students absent than historically. So that's further increasing or increasing our loss of revenue.
Correct.
Okay. So how do we increase revenue?
Yeah, one of the biggest ways to increase revenue is for students to come to school, because I know that's hard. That is hard.
You mean both to attend our schools and to show up?
Show
school.
Show up every day.
Yeah.
It's hard, especially with COVID and kids needing to stay home for various things. That has, again, negatively impacted the attendance rates. But if you could get even a 2% increase, it's a fairly significant amount. And a 2% increase in student attendance is not a severe amount. It's not a huge number.
That's 2% of 18 million, about $360,000.
Yeah.
Dollars. The increase if we just had 2% more attendance.
It's somewhere in that range, yeah. So looking, and this is kind of a preview of what our multi-year projection is going to look like at second interim next week. Where we closed our books last year, we had a 25.71% fund balance. What we're projecting in 23-24 is a 21.2% and 18.82% 24-25 and 13.54 and 25.
We can't hear you.
26.
Say that again.
So we have 21.2 and 23-24, 18.82% and 24-25, and 25-26, that's 13.54%. So that's where we currently stand. And so, oops, it's not my computer that I'm looking at. We did want to show what the salary increase would look like for the district if we were to go and give a 10.33% across the board, and which is what the last proposal was that we had received. And what that does to our district for 23-24, it would drop us to 13.82%. So absolutely we can afford it in the current year. It drops us next year to 5.22%. 25-26, we actually have an ending fund balance of $1.9 million negative. So that would be a 5.78% negative fund balance.
So, Chris, I'm confused. Because in 25-26, we get the TK population, which should increase revenues, correct? Can you explain to me why the revenues continue to drop if we're expecting them to increase with that population?
That's a great question. When you talk about the revenues on the general fund, there's something called encroachment that also impacts the district. I try not to say that word very often, but what it is there are programs that are not fully funded, two primary programs for the district. One is the routine restricted maintenance account, and we're required to set aside 3% of our general fund expenses every year in the routine restricted maintenance account, and the way you fund it is through an encroachment. So that one is just automatically. So as your expenses go up, so too does that encroachment. That is a negative revenue. The other program is actually special education. And so as your expenses go up in both of those and your total general fund goes up, your encroachment goes up, which means a negative revenue.
So essentially, it does nothing.
Correct.
For us.
It hurts us.
It hurts us.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
That's a great
But
question.
you'll also notice that I don't try and talk about that because it can be seen as negative.
Right. Right.
But that's a really good question. The other thing that I think is really critical is the one thing that we need to remember is that when we give a salary settlement, it's not just 1 year.
It's all of them.
It goes across the board. And again, my requirement is to, under AB 1200, to issue a multi-year budget. And the other thing that I think is critical is that this shows a negative in 25-26. In June, 25-26 is year 2 of our multi-year projection.
What?
It's year 2, not year 3.
In June, because we roll 23-24 would no longer be included in my multi-year projections. 24-25 becomes year 1 of my multi-year. 25-26 becomes year 2. 26-27 becomes my year 3.
And what would that deficit be? Just it.
Well, the reason I have a note at the bottom, I would need to actually cut $3.14 million approximately out of the budget
in 26-27,
beginning 25-26. In order, because you try and make the smallest cut you could.
So the reserve looks big right now. So you could give teachers a one-time, bonus amount of money, which isn't good for them because it doesn't take care of them in future years, but it's good for us. But if we give them a bigger chunk for permanent, then it puts us at risk in the out years. Is that what?
Whenever you give ongoing salary agreements, it impacts your multi-year projection. So it does more or less have the impact that you're saying.
So I've asked this question before. Without having more students in Ross Valley, which they're not knocking down the doors to do, is the only, through a parcel tax, then asking our Ross Valley district for more money each year through some type of, and I know nothing about parcel tax, that's why I don't know, how do we get that rolling and how do we increase that ask to the community in order to increase our revenues? Pay our teachers better?
Get the state to change its policies.
States aren't, they're not going to change their policy. They're not going to change ADA.
Well, I don't know whether they talked about it this year's legislative day, but when I went last year and the year before, there was a conversation around not funding based on, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it was started. But
is that one of the only solutions we can think of?
No, there's a competition for students.
There is a competition
so let's be honest about what it really is. There's a lot of draw on our students. We are actively trying to get students to go to our schools, and they have other options. So that's got to be called to account, because that's 100 kids that could go to our schools that aren't. That's approximately $8,000 a kid. That's $800,000 in revenue if we could get 100 kids to go to our schools and not competition schools.
what was the drop during COVID? I know in past presentations you've shown our enrollment drop, and we had, COVID saw the biggest drop, and then it flattened, but it hasn't gone back up to where it was pre-COVID.
No, we did go up this year slightly. And primarily that's a result of the transitional kindergarten rollout. But we did see roughly a 15% drop in our total enrollment, and I want to say it was about 275 children, just kind of round numbers. So that's part of the problem, which is why you're seeing those, the negative 5 point whatever percent reduction in funded ADA and minus 6%. Those are the reasons that you're starting to see those types of numbers out there. And we also saw that in the prior year.
One other question I had, Chris, from the revenue going down, but expenses going up. So you get numbers, the cost of living numbers that you get from the governor's budget. You talked about the revenue side of the cost of living increases to the revenue. Do they also give you expense factors that you're supposed to, because cost for PG&E and all this, all of our expenses, do they give you those expense costs, like what you're supposed to build into your expense lines to project?
Part of that is there is a consumer price index, a CPI number, and so we look at those, and we do have some of that built in. The percentages are really small, though. They're in the 2% range. Okay. So, yes, but... And then the other thing that is important to note is that you have normal, what's called step and column costs for all staff. And that's where, with no other change, just simply rolling the year over, many staff get additional salary increases because of that. And so you have that, and it does vary year to year as well. And so that was part of what I was looking at for the second interim budget. So it was a pretty extensive look at it. I know I spent a long time dealing with it the last couple of weeks.
And we'll get that additional year, the 26-27 year, added into the budget in June, which is the first budget for the next year that we look at?
Right.
Or that's when we approve, that's when we adopt.
At adoption, yeah. Okay. I do have a lot of that information, so because I've already started looking at it, I could present it as part of the budget presentation, just like I do now, but it won't be built into the SACS forms. Because the SACS won't have that, it's the third year. That's our
standard account code structure. Okay.
That's actually all of our financial documents. Right. They're called SACS forms, I'm sorry.
So Chris, we need to cut $3 million in 25-26. How do we do that?
I do have this slide as well, one last slide. This was from our 2020 fiscal year, and we did 2 rounds of layoffs on the classified side, and so we have not brought back most of those positions. Oftentimes you look at those types of positions, and we also cut an administrator as well, and so really there's not much fat, and so really to get to 3.14 million, we're looking at programs, and I'm not sure there's even enough there.
In programs, you mean like electives, for example, and other things that catapult our kids to enter high school in a better position than if those programs were not in place.
Correct.
Counseling services, special education, things like that as well?
You are limited in the amount that you can cut out of those areas because there's what's called special ed maintenance of effort, and so that really ties your ability to be able to cut those programs.
Yeah, counseling is not included in the maintenance of effort unless it's directly related to a student's individualized education plan. So just general education counseling you could cut as an example, but we also know that it's really hard because it's hugely detrimental to not have counseling services for kids. Yeah.
And we do have counseling dollars that we receive. I'm trying to think of the program right now, but it's a special categorical program, county mental health program services. So that does pay for part of it, and so you wouldn't be cutting things out of there necessarily.
And I know this is like maybe an esoteric kindergarten question because I'm getting into economics here, but what magical shift could possibly happen from the governor's office that would indicate that that deficit can be somehow alleviated? I mean, what is it that they, I know that you've got the shortfall, the miscalculations, those are the clowns doing the accounting up there. What are the things that could help us be hopeful for, go up to Sacramento, hold their feet to the fire to make sure they're doing, so that we're not getting the trickle down of ineffective leadership? Like, what can we do?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I haven't really thought about that.
I mean, it's just sort of like, okay, if the governor didn't do this, didn't play monkey business with, for example, the gimmicks of $8 million, what can we do? Because we get up there and we advocate.
But it's not just we, it's us, it's
know.
the community, it's everybody in California.
But I'm talking about why I'm sitting here, right? So it's like, what could be that magical thing that I could see in the papers that go, oh, they're moving in the right direction, something.
Yeah, what we would need really is
higher priority of education.
That's right. Yeah, higher priority. We would need Proposition 98. Proposition 98 came in and it was supposed to give us, it was supposed to be a floor in terms of funding. We were supposed to always be going higher and higher and higher and higher with it. And what it's really become is a ceiling. And so they won't give you more, which is why you get the LAO coming in and saying, no, you need to fix this gimmick, accounting, and pull that out because we don't want to increase the amount of dollars that have to go to you in the future. That's something that we need to address. I do have to hand it to the governor to even prioritize us at that level. And then we need to start looking at other programs that maybe not, or may not be as essential. Because I could think of some that
and when you say we should look at do you mean the state of California?
The state of California, not me, not us. I can think of some that may not be quite as necessary, and we spend probably billions of dollars on them.
Can I ask a question about the flip-flop between community funded and state aid where we are? Because I was under the impression that if we move to community funded, which is property taxes, are $1 billion here, and that would help us with more money. But that doesn't seem to be the case for the next 3 years.
Yeah, so what ends up happening is, and let me go back to a slide. I'm looking for a specific slide.
The scale.
I'm looking for the scale. What ends up happening is when the decision to go into community funded versus state aid, it's not a decision. It happens
It's a calculation.
Right. It's a calculation based upon what your property taxes are versus what your LCFF calculations are. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that. It's that one. I promise I'm not touching. Is that you? Thank you. And so what ends up happening is as you go into community funded status, it sounds good because and it is for the year you're in it because you're actually getting more than what you would get under state aid funding. So you go through all of the matriculations of your budget and you look at your local control funding formula calculator that the state provides to us, and you do your calculation and you say, okay, I'm supposed to get $19 million. But when I look at my property tax base, I'm getting $19,100,000. So I'm actually getting the higher of those two, so I would get the $19,100,000. But what ends up happening is the first year you get the entire amount. The second year, there's a couple things that happen. You no longer get your supplemental property taxes because the district gets supplemental property taxes as part of our property tax revenues every year, we no longer would receive that. And that's a fairly significant amount. And then the second thing that does happen is we would then have to start funding the charter ADA through in lieu property taxes. Now, and there is a change on this. And let me come back to that. There's a change in law where we would no longer, the district would, beginning in 25, 26, I think it is, would have to pay for the entire in lieu property taxes owed the charter school. And so we would be funding that. The difference is that we still look at what our total $19 million, I'm using that number right now just as kind of a number for us to talk about. That full $19 million is our total amount that we would get in LCFF funding. But then what ends up happening is we would pay only up to the maximum amount of our property taxes if 100% of the kids were the charters and not us. And so you would never owe more than your property taxes. And so as you pay it out, you're still going to get up to the 19 million. So all it does is it becomes a cash flow issue where we would pay dollars to the charter school, and the state would then backfill us through state aid. So it's just it's a shell game.
So essentially, you've got two different funding frameworks, and you flip-flop back and forth because they've got different revenues and expenses that you allocate in the different frameworks. So when you're in one framework and you're over by $50,000, if your expenses under the new framework that you get flipped into are greater than $50,000, then you flip back to the other framework where you get that $50,000, but you don't have to pay that $50,000 until the next year. So you lose it. So that's why you flip-flop back and forth, is because our state has these two different frameworks for how districts get funded. And if you're on that edge where you don't really go all the way into one by a little bit because you don't have to pay those extra expenses until the year after you get in it. It's
one of the
talk about a policy shift too, because then how much of your time are you going to spend doing two budgets? And we're going to have to basically pay attention to two different budgets with two different sets of funding.
But that does get back to one of those policy issues that I think would make sense for the district to start talking to our local legislators. It doesn't make sense that the Ross Valley School District down the road, and I'm thinking 20 years maybe, when our property tax base is significantly higher and we would potentially be a community funded district permanently, it doesn't make sense why Ross Valley taxpayers should have to fund charter school students that come from Mill Valley, Ross, Larkspur, Corte Madera, out of our tax dollars, when currently, the way it's structured, those districts have to pay in lieu property taxes for the attendance of their students that attend when they're higher funded than us. So that is one thing that I would think that would be something we should talk about. It might be unique to the Ross Valley School District in the state because there aren't very many. There's a small number of community funded districts to begin with, and then to have a charter school in the community taking, it is unique. And oftentimes the state isn't willing to look at legislation when it comes to community funded districts, but if it's just shifting from one to another, they might be more willing to do it.
But we still have to fully fund those two charter schools and cut $3 million of ours?
We would have to fund potentially.
Yeah.
Which is also simple to solve.
Right. No problem.
Easy.
Yeah, we would not have to fund the Hartwood charter, because Hartwood charter currently is chartered under a district in Sonoma County. So because of that, we don't have the same issue, even though they're within our boundaries.
But the students that go there could still come to our schools and actually help support our budget.
Absolutely.
So Chris, in line with what Chris was asking earlier about going, like, what can we do? Because it's fundamentally, there's some inequity here, a lot of inequity. I think there's 17 or something districts in Marin County, and 3 of us are state funded and the rest are community funded. is there some way we can address the legislators about that? I mean, that is so fundamentally unfair. Like, we're sitting next to a Ross, which probably spends 10x what we can on our teachers, on our students. And how is that fair when we're being funded? And I just don't understand. Like, but where clearly it's not coming from you. But like, where do we go? Because, you know, I see these things, they go every February, they go up and they talk, but who do we talk to get this fixed? Because I want to pay everybody. I want to pay them what they're worth. But we don't have the money, and I don't know where do we fix this, because this is not, I mean, this is so unfair.
Yeah, and when you look at our revenues last year and revenues per student and do that same calculation across the county, we're actually the lowest funded in the general fund per student of the 19 entities. So it is a major issue.
Are we also below the state per student funding?
We're absolutely below the state in terms of...
State's at like 13 and we're at like, so we're also below the state.
It's like 5% or something.
Yeah, and if you go, there's a website, it's ed-data. I don't remember if it's org or com, but it's a state website. They put together all of the district information. They look at enrollment, they look at our expenses, revenues, and they do averages. You can look at all that data in there. And the most recent data that they have in there for financial is 21-22, but it goes into that. It looks at us versus the state averages. And they're looking specifically at like elementary districts, because elementary districts are funded differently than high school and then unified. So that's one of the key things. But then going back to your specific question, the state has wanted to do away with community-funded districts for a long time, but community-funded districts have pushed back because it would mean program cuts for them. And so it's never happened. The state hasn't had the appetite to do it. And it's primarily the wealthy communities along the coast.
Only 10% of the districts in the state are community funded with property revenue that exceeds.
10% of this?
About 10% of the state's districts are community funded, where their property tax revenue exceeds what the state minimum LCFF funding is. And so, and I believe that like 10% of that 10% are in Marin County as well. I think it's about 100 districts out of 1,000 some odd districts in this state. I think
it's lower than that.
Or maybe lower than that. And I think, so in terms of just this issue, most districts in the state are state back funded.
Yeah, and then to kind of go on to that, if you look at the attendance for those districts, they're generally smaller areas as well. The districts are generally
community funded ones, yes.
The community funded districts are generally smaller. So you're not going to generally see them in large urban areas with various populations. That's just how it's laid out.
Yeah.
Can you state the name of that website again?
ed-data.org.
Is it dash?
ed-data.org.
Thank you.
There was also a really good article in, I think it's ed100.org. It's education information on the whole LCFF funding, like the history of it, and Prop 98. And so I'll see if I can find that resource for everyone.
Yeah.
It just came out this month, too.
I mean, I understand it. I just want to know how to change it. Like,
so I think can we change it? In mass, there has to be a shift in the focus of the importance of education from the governor's office. You know, I mean, think about the amount of money coming out of this state in different areas. From tech down to agriculture. We feed 80% of the country from the things we grow here. And that in itself, a small shift, a 5% shift.
Well, the Prop 13 initiative that was going to apply or exempt corporate buildings instead of just houses didn't pass in our state.
Yeah, I know.
So that was one of those shifts that had been on the revenue.
To try to rectify it.
To try and resolve some of it.
The mistake is putting it on the ballot. That's the mistake.
And the legislatures didn't want to do it.
Sorry, I digress.
So basically, we're looking at very limited ways to increase our revenues, like the parcel tax would be one of them that's obvious, and then ADA and improving enrollment.
And bonds are just for facilities, so that doesn't do anything for your general.
It doesn't do anything for the
And winning the
salaries.
competition for
competition
students.
for
And
students.
increasing students.
I know some other private schools have lost a number of families and they're recruiting our students to fill their empty seats.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, because it's not unique to public education. Education in general in the state is in decline. You're also seeing it in the private education as well.
Universities as well.
Yeah. So,
Thank you.
this topic was a governor's budget. You've asked it about, and we were looking at the future years.
Correct.
We've got the second interim coming up in our next meeting, next week. So we've got our second interim coming up. I'm going back to where we started in terms of where do we start having those conversations, either where in the month, where in the years. I mean, it sounds like it's obviously not on the agenda tonight to be talking about this, but at some point we're looking in the not too distant future about where in the budget, back to your budget timeline slide or the years, do we start having those conversations? No? Coming up.
I think coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The not too distant future.
Not too distant future. And even as early as next week, is in the context of the second interim.
Okay.
Can I ask another, even though I've been here a year, I still say I'm the new guy. Are we legally allowed to run a deficit in our reserves?
A deficit in the reserves?
Yeah.
No. That would have to be rectified. That's why we would be in a negative budget status.
So that's just, it's a non-option.
No,
Okay.
it's not an option.
And that's the state, in order to try to ensure the districts don't run in a negative, require a 3% ending fund balance. And then we know that the 3% is, I've forgotten how many months of payroll does 3% reserve?
One payroll is roughly $1.9 million and 3% is roughly $900,000. So it's
All right, so a 3% reserve that the state requires doesn't even pay for 1 month of payroll. And so the board does have an additional, by board policy or board bylaw, an additional 7%. And so that gives us a total of a 10% reserve that we try to maintain. We're mandatorily required to maintain 3.
correct.
And so, but we want to try to maintain 10%, because how many months then does 10%? Would be roughly 2.
Yeah.
2
Roughly
months
2
then
months.
of salary. So should
Correct.
something happen, like when, and the reason for reserves of having those is if the state, which they haven't, it seems to go in cycles of how frequently they do the deferrals as an
Yes.
example, but the purpose of that ending fund is to give you the cash on hand should something happen with the state's budget.
The state doesn't like to do deferrals though, because what ends up happening is your poorer districts, the ones that have the lower property tax bases, end up paying for that for everybody else. And our district would be impacted, but it would be minimally because the bulk of our dollars, again, of our local control funding formula dollars, come in the form of property taxes. That's why we're close to being community funded. So they would only defer the state aid portion. They would not be deferring your property taxes. So what ends up happening is community funded districts still have all their dollars, and those poor, generally inner city type districts foot the bill for everybody.
There is an account though in Marin County that allows you to borrow money from them at a very low rate in order to carry unfunded stuff, correct?
We are blessed in the county of Marin to have the county of Marin. And what they do is they allow districts to actually go negative in terms of cash, and they charge you negative interest.
Negative interest.
And so,
in order to cover you for those.
Correct.
Those moments.
It's the only county in the state that does that. Everybody else, if you needed to have cash, you would be looking at your cash flow every month. And if you do go negative, you would then have to go out and look at a tax revenue anticipation note, and you'd have to borrow.
Would with interest.
You're paying back interest and you have certain timelines, which you have with the county.
That's why
as
Marin
well.
has it in place.
Yes.
And that's just a short-term bridge,
Short-term
cash
bridge,
flow
yeah.
funding, it's not a long-term.
I could not go negative for a year.
Okay,
Every month.
But it's interest-free.
which is good for cash flow, but you can't.
Yeah,
it's
we
not
just
like-
have to pay the interest that would be earned on it to the general pool that then gets distributed to anybody who might have an excess. So that's the county of Marin though, that does that.
Do we have any more questions for Chris before we go to public comment?
Thank you for putting all this together.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chris. All right, so no questions? All right, so with that, we're gonna go out to public comment. Do we have any comment cards for this topic? For this one? Okay. So, would anybody change their mind and want to speak on this topic? All right, so,
Can we take a break after this?
yeah, take a break. So we're gonna, I'm gonna take a break after the talk. All right, so no public comment on this topic. We will, we don't really have to do anything, it was just for information. So if there's any further discussion we wanted to have on this? Okay. So I'm gonna move on to the next item on our agenda, but before we do that, did you need to take a break?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll do like a quick 2-minute break. 2 minutes. All right, welcome back from our brief break. The next item on our agenda is the public disclosure of the initial contract proposal for the 2024 through 27 school years from the Ross Valley Teachers Association to the Ross Valley School District. So please go ahead.
All right, just if I can just start with, so as part of what's required is before contract negotiations can begin for, and it would be for a successor contract, because our current contract expires June 30th, 2024. So, but before we can begin negotiations, we must sunshine the proposal. So that's what you're all doing here tonight, is to sunshine RVTA's proposal for the 2024 through 2027 school years. And then, of course, once we ratify a new contract, you still have negotiations within each of those 3 years, because you can always open salary and benefits and articles of two parties' choice. So between the district or the teachers' union. And so, Karen, do you want to start?
I'll start,
Okay,
yes.
great.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you for listening to our Sunshine proposal for the 2024-27 contract. We thank and appreciate the board for last year's collaboration with our union to negotiate a contract that was a meaningful step toward helping our members make a living wage in Marin. Last year's work was a beginning, not a one-year and done solution. RVSD continues to be near the bottom or at the bottom in the salary comps in Marin. As you heard a month ago, our members are hurting. We, our general classroom teachers, special education teachers, counselors, speech and language pathologists, psychologists, we educate and support all of the students of Ross Valley School District every day. RVTA declared impasse for the current year's negotiations because we're feeling like an afterthought in the budgeting process, and we believe RVSD management can and should do better to support its most valuable asset, its educators. We are opening the 24-27 contract because we need a bargaining cycle that ensures RVSD teachers are a priority in the budgeting process. And we want you to show us that you are doing everything you can to ensure RVSD can attract and retain the best educators, because RVSD students deserve the best. And with that, we will go to our presentation. So here is our initial contract proposal for 2024-27 school years. Ross Valley School District students deserve the best. To support our students, the Ross Valley Teachers Association is opening the following articles of the collective bargaining agreement. Article 1, recognition. We seek to clarify association rights language to best protect and support union members in their role to support education services, because RVSD students deserve the best.
Article 3, wages. We seek to increase compensation so that Ross Valley School District is competitive in the county in order to attract and retain qualified professional staff because RVSD students deserve the best.
Article 4, health and welfare benefits. We seek to increase district contributions to member health and welfare benefits to attract and retain qualified professional staff because RVSD students deserve the best.
Article 6, hours of employment. We seek to ensure teachers have time to develop innovative lessons, provide essential feedback to students and their families, and to differentiate lessons to meet the needs of each student because RVSD students deserve the best.
Article 7, grievance procedure. We seek to ensure educators are professionally represented in the event of a grievance in the arbitration process to ensure the best professional outcome to support education services because RVSD students deserve the best.
Article 9, class size. We seek to reduce class size and increase the adult to student ratio to improve student success because RVSD students deserve the best.
Article 17, retirement options. We seek to clarify language regarding retirement options to best protect and support union members in their role to support education services because RVSD students deserve the best.
Oh my goodness. Article 18. Yes. We had to practice. We seek to clarify language. This is general provisions. We seek to clarify language regarding association activity to best protect and support union members in their role to support education services because RVSD students deserve the best. We are united that Ross Valley School District students deserve the best.
The end.
That's it?
That's it. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. So with that, did anybody here have questions? So we move to comment column? All right, so I have 9 comment cards. If anyone has a last minute one to submit, pass it over to Teresa. Otherwise, I have 9 here, and I'm just going to go in order. I don't know if you want to come up and line up so you can just go in order. You know how to see up here. So I've got Alicia Hanks, Cindy Credo, and Emma Beauchamp. Yeah, I'm getting there. And then Marjorie McDonald.
Is that what you want us to all come up?
Yeah, just come up and sit down. So it goes faster that way.
And don't forget the 3.
Yeah. So you're each going to have 3 minutes to speak. At 2.5 minutes, the timer will give you a warning that you have 30 seconds left. So if you just want to state your name and affiliation, and then you don't have to, but it helps.
Hello, I'm Cindy Credo, the TK teacher at Green Valley School. First, I would like to invite each of you to visit my TK classroom. Come witness the joy, the wonder, the controlled chaos, and the pure of heart of my 4- and 5-year-olds. I invite you to see the meaningful relationships that we build, the individualized time we commit to knowing each student, the time spent quietly sitting next to a child who is struggling, the countless trips to the bathroom, minutes spent observing to teach and support their social emotional learning, their physical growth, life skills, and academic journey. A classroom filled with 4- and 5-year-olds is busy, loud, time-consuming, and absolutely wonderful. No words can describe a class of TKers. My TKers deserve the best. All Ross Valley School District students deserve the best. Last year, the 9% wage increase was an investment of $309.04 for each of my students for the school year, or $1.67 for each of my TK students per day. The last proposed 2% wage increase would equate to an investment of $97.40 for each of my TK students for 180 days, or a 54-cent pre-tax investment each day for my 4 and 5-year-olds. We all understand the hardships of living within a budget. It's time for management to figure out how to make changes to invest in our students by investing in the teachers. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alicia Hanks. My story in this district starts a ways back. In fact, you could say that it started when my mom was a student and my grandma, Millie Millar, was the librarian at Manor School. Or you could start from the time that I started Manor School at age 4 and my classroom was half the multi-purpose room. I watched the multi-age program come to Manor. I was the first full class of 5th graders to graduate and start 6th grade at Whitehill. I ran through the hills behind Whitehill for the cross-country team, and I ran for student class president in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I helped my grandma, who was now the librarian at Whitehill, transform the card catalog to digital and put a barcode on every single book in the library. I went on to get my teaching credential and knew that I wanted to come back and work in the district I grew up in. I started my journey as a teacher at Brookside School 17 years ago. In order to live and work in this area, my husband and I moved into the in-law unit of my grandma's house. Since then, I have taught kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, worked with 10 different principals, been on the hiring committee for several teachers and 2 principals, piloted multiple curriculums, worked through the transition of Brookside Upper and Lower becoming 2 independent K-5 schools, worked through 3 pregnancies and maternity leaves, and 1 very long and challenging pandemic that we are still facing the effects of today. I am now the reading intervention and ELD teacher at Brookside. My children are in third grade kindergarten and an upcoming TKer in 2 years. And because I am still working in this district, all 5 of us are living in the in-law unit of my grandma's house and rely heavily on my family for childcare support to cut the cost of daycare. To say that I have a lot of history in this district, investment in the education that we provide our students, and desire to continue working in this district is an understatement. I am inspired by our equity work, encouraged by our commitment to strengthen our language arts program, honored to provide support and intervention services to struggling students, and grateful to witness every day the dedication that all our teachers and special education team put towards providing the best, most well-rounded education for every Ross Valley student. However, as the cost of living continues to increase and the fact that this district has not given a salary increase big enough to cover the annual cost of living increase for the past 6 years, it is unclear what the future holds for me and my family. My grandma turns 89 in a month, and I know our time living with her will eventually come to an end. When that time comes, my family and I will have big decisions to make about where we live and where I work. It not only breaks my heart to think about uprooting my children from the friends and teachers they love, but it also tears me apart thinking of leaving the job and school that I have loved being a part of and dedicated my career to for the last 17 years. I urge you to prove that you value the teachers and staff of the Ross Valley School District and find a way to make our salaries more competitive in order to retain new highly qualified teachers as well as those of us who have made a home and a career in our schools.
Good evening. My name is Emma Beauchamp, and I have a fairly long history in the district, not that long. I was at Manor and Whitehill parent for 15 consecutive years, and overlapping with that time, I've been a Whitehill art teacher for almost 15 years. I very much appreciate the work that was started last year by you in addressing the many years of salary neglect that caused our district to fall to the position of one of the worst paid districts in the county. Given our current state of impasse with negotiations, I'm concerned that you are not feeling the same urgency that we teachers feel. What I'm anticipating is having to once again say goodbye to esteemed colleagues as they move on to districts that truly value them. I'm going to tell you about 2 teachers that occupy my thoughts in particular. One of them you know well, it's 7th grade science teacher Alex Obenchain, who is here tonight with his students, presenting their work even with a sprained ankle that happened today. The other is Brianna Hatfield, a 6th grade math and science teacher. Both these teachers are energetic, student-centered, knowledgeable in their field, and are greatly invested in creating community within our school. The rapport each of them has with students is exceptional. From the moment Brianna was hired, she has stepped up to take on additional teaching assignments as needed. She is the Mathletes Club leader and helps run our after-school tutoring club. Alex is a dynamic presence on our campus, and along with serving on the leadership committee, he runs the Spirit Club, which gives students many opportunities to be involved and feel connected on campus. Brianna and Alex are both web leaders who run the 5th grade Moving Up Day and 6th grade orientation. It's not my intention to make Alex and Brianna feel self-conscious, but I think it's important to let you know what type of teacher is earning your lowest salary. These educators are beginning their careers. They're in hard-to-fill positions and subject areas. We have helped train them, and they could easily walk away at the end of this school year and work in a neighboring school district for significantly more money. Every year I've worked in Ross Valley, every year we've heard about the fiscal cliff. Yes, our state funding is not ideal, but decisions about what to spend the budget on are yours to make. It is a choice you make when you don't prioritize your educator salaries. At times it feels like we're living in the musical Oliver, holding our bowls out and asking for more, please. It is exhausting and demoralizing to come to board meetings each year begging for a fair living wage. Thank you for hearing me tonight.
I'm Marjorie McDonald, and I'm a school psychologist at Wade Thomas in Hidden Valley. I support pay increases for our teachers, increased stipends for special education positions, and a separate salary schedule for speech pathologists. For the last 4 years, special education has been heavily burdened due to vacancies in our department. Whatever we can do to position our district to poach from our neighbors, I am in support of. Presently, accounting for inflation, I earn $10,000 less than my first job out of college 20 years ago. I moved to Ross Valley Schools to work close to my husband's job and relocate our family here. With the pay structure of the psychologist schedule, when I reach my supermax salary after 11 years of working here and 18 in the field, I will earn $15,000 less than I did at the job I left 11 years before, not accounting for inflation. In Ross Valley, these incremental increases are a reduction in pay every year. I have been incredibly moved by the personal stories our staff have shared, so our management and board can see how crucial wage increases. While most of my working adult life has been in education, this negotiating experience brings to mind my short career in financial services, which may be more relatable to the board in front of me. When I worked in private sector and negotiated a pay increase, I met with my supervisors and discussed my merit, my accomplishments, and my worth to the company. I'd like to spend a moment doing just that. I am a student advocate, an expert in learning disabilities, autism, ADHD, developmental disabilities, special education, and social emotional interventions. I am trained in neuropsychological assessment, improving school systems, MTSS, mental health disorders, and I could go on. I am tired of educators being considered bottom of the barrel. There isn't a person behind me that is not as intelligent or hardworking as the coworkers I met in finance. The teachers here are experts in delivering virtual instruction, hybrid instruction, cramming year's curriculum into a shortened day, preventing the spread of pathogens, trauma-informed learning, teaching students from disadvantaged backgrounds, teaching students with limited English. They teach social emotional learning. They provide counseling. They're becoming structured literacy experts, and I could go on and on. This is proven by the fact that the majority of our students are meeting or exceeding language, arts, and math standards. We deserve a raise because we are the best. In my role here, I also evaluate students residing within our district boundaries that attend private schools. This provides me the opportunity to see the private K-8 schools in our county. I tell you this, they are not as good as what we offer. More often than not even close. We have the best teachers and they deserve a raise because they are the best there is available and they demonstrate that every day. Lastly, this district is built on the backs of local mothers, many of whom may have had the privilege of choice to work in their community, near their children and earn less money. But it's clear that the rising cost of living, relying on local moms to staff our schools is no longer a reliable human resources strategy, nor does it support our equity mission. Given the stress of this position, compounded by the cost of living, your staff resent how much less they earn in comparison to their counterparts in the county. Please approve a wage increase because you see that we are your talent and have earned it. You came here to create change. Please do it.
Okay, Joni Sampson, Erin Henderson, Sandra LeBeau, and Tally Henry. You just want to take seats.
Okay, well, first of all, I did all that. Hi. All right. Good evening. My name is Joni Sampson, and I'm a second grade teacher in Indian Valley. I've lived in San Anselmo for over 20 years, and when my husband and I moved here, we didn't realize the amazing community we stumbled upon before having our own kids. Eventually, we had two children of our own. And both of them attended Brookside and Whitehall. And they were fortunate to have the most dedicated and incredible teachers who sincerely cared about them and their education. Unfortunately, many of those teachers are no longer employed in our district and have moved because they couldn't afford to stay in the Bay Area or for better wages in other school districts. Having been in the school district as a parent for the past 15 years, and now a teacher for the past 9 years, I've witnessed the high turnover of teachers, and it's disappointing to me that our district constantly struggles to retain highly qualified teachers, especially new teachers who we need and who will add value to our community and inspire our children. Although my own children are no longer in the district, I'm now facing the challenge of being able to afford to pay for their higher education. My daughter is a sophomore in college, attending a school 3,000 miles away, an added expense for travel on top of tuition. And we have a senior in high school who is about to go to college. Fingers crossed, he gets accepted into a school in the state. But if you haven't heard, California universities are extremely competitive and there's no guarantee that that will happen. We are having to plan ahead in case he doesn't get into college in California and end up out of state. Have you seen the price tag for out-of-state tuition? With the college expenses ahead for us and for our two children, on top of inflation for food, gas, utilities, home maintenance, and all the day-to-day costs rising, it's going to be a struggle to stay in Marin for our family. Unfortunately, a 2% wage increase is not going to make a difference, nor does it make me feel valued for the work that I do every day. In these past 9 years, I've had to shift my teaching annually for ever-changing professional development training, a global pandemic, continuous curriculum shifts, and a loss of prep periods for the first half of last school year because we didn't have a PE teacher. Again, because we can't retain them. The day never really ends for a teacher, as many days I'm working at home or on a weekend, and I continue to do my best, provide the best for my students and colleagues, and show up for this district because I love what I do. I hope you can see the value that each and every one of us has been to this district and show your support by offering a wage increase that is fair and aligns with the growing cost of living in Marin County.
I'm Erin Henderson, and I teach second grade at Brookside Elementary, and I'm the mom of 2 Brookside bears. And I just got to become, so it was a warm August day in 2001 when I sat at folding tables, and Mary Jane Burke told a room full of paraeducators and teachers that we are teachers and we need to be creative and do more with less because there were budget cuts. And she told us that every warm August morning from 2001 to 2014, when I completed my grad school education. and moved to a hospital school environment for a few years. Then my husband got a job at Hidden Valley where he had student taught, and he called me on a cold November afternoon and said, there is an opening at Manor, you have to come meet these teachers. And then I came and met those teachers, and oh my goodness, were they extraordinary. I taught at Manor for a little while, and went back to the hospital, and it was a warm July day in 2018 when 6 dedicated hospital school teachers and I went to Sacramento and we passed AB 2109. It was ed code for hospitalized students and their siblings, so I know it can be done. And then it was a very warm June afternoon when Mrs. Hayhurst texted me and said, do you want to teach second grade at Brookside? And I said, oh my God, more than anything else in the whole world. Because I met these teachers and my sons had been taught by these teachers, and these teachers I worked with students in about 65 districts in the state of California and outside. There are great teachers everywhere, for sure. There really is truly something extraordinary about these teachers. So I've been doing more with less for a really long time. We've all been doing more with less for a really long time. We have been asked to get creative and do more with less for our entire careers. I learned to duct tape folders when I was a paraeducator in 2001 because we couldn't buy new folders. And now I put plumber's tape on my car because I can't afford the bodywork to keep the bumper on. Our roof has so many holes that the rain is coming tomorrow, and my husband and my sons and I, before I came to this meeting, started cleaning out the buckets that we were gonna put all over the place because we absolutely cannot afford roof repairs. And I put up the buckets because I want my sons to have these teachers, and this district is so extraordinary. So I need to ask once again we can't keep being creative and do more with less. It's your turn to be creative and do more with less and figure out how to do it.
Wow. I just want to obviously echo the support that I think everyone here is feeling for everything that's been said by everyone who's spoken. I am the parent of 2 4th graders at Hidden Valley. This is our 6th year there. We did a victory lap of kindergarten. We've been really, what you just described, what you see, that is exactly what we feel. I think every parent in here and probably in this district feels the same way. And how fortunate we are to have the teachers that show up every single day. They meet our kids where they are. They help them find their path as they head towards a pretty intense future. They are obviously, I think, the top priority and should be from a budget standpoint. And it sounds like from what everybody was saying in here that there's a lot of agreement about that. And there are a lot of smart people in this room and in this community. And I heard a lot of obstacles to being able to deliver what these teachers need to just live here in our community and afford basic daily living expenses, housing, healthcare, cars, these things. So I heard all the obstacles, but I have to believe that there is some way to overcome those and to tap into something we're not tapping into. I'm new to this issue. I don't know the ins and outs of how the budgetary, and learned a lot tonight from what I could hear. And I would like to learn more. I know there are so many people in our community who want to learn more, but I don't know who to even ask. I would think to ask all of you, but it sounds like a lot of you have the same questions. But what do we need to do to get this done? So we're not in this position. This shouldn't be a piecemeal year after year, do more with less. They're already doing all of that. What do we need to do? Who do we talk to? Who do we lobby? I'm not clear on what the right path forward is, but I know there is one. There has to be, and we can't be where even we are in the district or the state. And so I implore you to let us know as the community, what can we do to support and to help? And please, as she said, do more with less, be creative on your part, but also ask us to assist and step up with that as well on behalf of all of our teachers.
Hello,
I am Sandra LeBeau. It is my 16th year in the Ross Valley School District and my first year making a public comment to the board. I have felt so lucky to have the colleagues that I've had. I've worked in kindergarten, third grade, first grade. The teams that I've worked with have been incredible. They support you, we collaborate, we create what is needed for the environment of our students. In those 16 years, I've gotten married, I've had 3 children. I have a 7th grader, a 5th grader, and a 2nd grader who have all had the opportunity to go through Ross Valley School District. And as I think about their teachers, we've had a wide range of teachers. They have had incredible, top-notch teachers that I feel so blessed that they've had the opportunity to have. And they deserve that, and so do all the kids at Ross Valley School District. These teachers engage their students, they bring joy into the classroom and truly care about their students. Look up, look around. I see a room of teachers, a sea of red. Take in their stories and see how committed they are to this community of learners. I ask you to be committed to this community of learners and committed to a solution. Sounds like the district needs to continue their work in promoting attendance and educating families on the effect of an extra ski day or long vacation.
Yes!
We went through this last year, begging to be paid what we deserve. This format we have doesn't show that we are valued. I feel valued every day from our students, from our families, from parents coming to speak, from our colleagues, but sadly the board's offer of 2% paints a different story. I ask you to invest in our teachers, that invest daily in our students and their futures, because Ross Valley students deserve it.
Gina Davis.
Hi, my name is Gina Davis, and I have 4 children in Ross Valley schools. I've spoken here before last year. And I'm also a former teacher, and I'm currently a substitute in the district. We all know educators are so grossly undervalued and underpaid in our country. We all know that there is a problem with our public school funding in California. Our greatest asset at RVSD is our teachers and staff at our school sites. I'm tired of hearing that at RSVD our hands are tied and there is nothing we can do. We teach our kids at school to think outside the box and to have a growth mindset. We are failing our kids by not modeling this, and they are the ones who are losing. In the short term, let's start by not wasting any more time and energy on salary negotiations and use some reserve funds on RVSD's most valuable asset, our school site teachers and staff. They are not asking for a lot of money. They are asking for cost of living and a comparable wage among Marin educators so that they can pay bills and support themselves and their families. By giving them the small raise they are asking for, it actually shows that you support them. And our that shows that you support them and our children. I'm terrified of losing our amazing teachers to other districts. If we lose teachers, our current recruiting problem will be the worst in the county since our teachers are the lowest compensated. And who suffers? Our children do. After we solve the problem in the short term, we need to model another skill taught in the classroom, teamwork. We need to work together to solve funding problems at the state and national level. I'm urging you to be open to working with the community on solutions. You should be directing and guiding our community of well-educated individuals on how we can get involved to change this massive funding crisis in our state and in our nation. My family is 100% invested in our public schools, and I want to see change now. No more wasted time, energy, and money. I'm urging you, please do the right thing. No more talk of support. We need immediate action now, and our community needs clear direction from you. Let's do this together.
Discussion? There's not really discussion, it's just presentation.
Bring it back to the board for any discussion.
Yes, would the board like to have any discussion after hearing all this feedback, or?
Maybe more about the presentation.
Oh, about the presentation, sorry. I mean, it's a sunshine, so.
So the discussion is just about the
sunshining of
sunshining of
yes.
the
Okay, proposal, yeah.
Okay. And I will
Ryan, anything?
had other things to say, but
I know other things to say, things I want to add to our agenda in the future, the near future.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. All right, so we will move on to our next agenda item. Thank you all for coming and speaking today and for showing your joy up. Thank you. It doesn't say so. Oh, it is. Hold on. We have to accept it?
Is it an action item?
It's not an action item. It says action. It says action discussion. All right, so we're back on. Okay. So real quick question. All right, so because we need to acknowledge receipt of the sunshine proposal, we need to do a roll call vote. So does somebody want to make a motion to accept it?
I make a motion to accept it.
acknowledge
I
receipt.
make a motion to acknowledge receipt of the sunshine, the initial contract
Okay.
proposal.
Great. First and a second, Daniel.
Aye.
Chris. Aye. Rachel. Aye. Shelley. Aye. Ryan.
Daniel, Chris.
Daniel. Okay. All right. All right, and then recommended approval of the annual audit report for the 2022-23 school year.
So moved.
Do you have to have
Yes.
public comment on that?
Well, there's no public here.
There is no public comment? Okay, so no public comment. Anybody want discussion, questions? Okay, none from me there. We had a motion? Or did you have something to say? This is from last meeting.
Yeah, it's from the last meeting that
Yeah.
we didn't get to. Chris, we're on to the annual audit. Is there anything in particular that you want to do or need to do? I think the board has reviewed.
Well, let me just talk about two things real fast. First, if you look at page 1 of the audit report, it actually provides the opinion. And so what we have is an unmodified opinion, which is a clean audit opinion. We do always have a discretely presented component unit that always shows as adverse. That's been for many, many years. That has to do with the Yes Foundation and their audit, and so we don't have that. So that will always show as adverse, but everything else is unmodified. We did have one finding, that's on page 88. There was a mistake made, and we have made changes to our checklist, our annual checklist as a result of it, and so to prevent it moving forward in the future. And so with this evening, what you would be doing is just taking action to accept the audit report as presented.
Okay.
I made a motion to approve.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, motion second. Ryan?
Right.
Daniel?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Shelley?
Aye.
Rachel? Aye. All right, so we have approved the annual audit report. Thank you, Chris. We have the mid-year LCAP update and budget overview for parents next.
All right, and I think tonight, in Julia's absence, Eric Sable, Director of Student Services, is going to do the presentation of this. This is another carryover item from our January 31st meeting that we did postpone until this evening.
And there it is. Thank you. I appreciate it. First, a big shout to Julia for all her work to put this together. And I'm happy to share it with the board and public. The background, what is this? The mid-year report. It's just a requirement for districts to present the LCAP and budget overview on or before February 28th. So that's why we are doing it today. And this report is structured in a pretty straightforward fashion. We're looking at all available mid-year data related to metrics that connect to our 3 LCAP goal areas, and then the expenditures that are connected to those data and goals. And Mr. Carson will has and will assist with explaining that. Three areas for our current year LCAP, and this is the last of the 3-year cycle. So 24-25 will represent the start of a new LCAP. Academic achievement, goal 1. Student wellness, goal 2. And community engagement, goal 3. So those are our big areas. Looking at goal 1, assess student learning in mathematics and English language arts, ELD, and provide interventions and supports as needed. So you can, just to quickly break down this chart, we have the category on the left, the baseline from, again, that first year of the cycle of data is measured by the LCAP, and then the mid-year update and our desired outcome. So for the CASP scores back in 2021, I should say, the spring of 21, the ELA 71%, math 62, and then we see from last spring that we saw growth in both areas. Our desired outcome for this year was to see a minimum 5-point growth for all students. So it's great to see that we've been able to do that as of last spring, but of course that's a minimum, so we're not looking to stop progress. And then of course the CASP exams will be administered this spring. English learner progress is another big area. And this is measuring the summative LPAC, which can be found and is publicly available on the California dashboard. So in 2022, we saw just over 55% of our multilingual learners, English learners, making progress towards English language proficiency. So basically the LPAC, takes 4 areas, speaking, writing, listening, speaking, on a 4-point rubric from kind of emerging to proficient. So that's how students are assessed. It's pretty holistic. And of course, it's a key part of the process to reclassify students when they are ready to graduate from receiving those English language support services. And then this past year, it dipped a little bit, 53.3 making progress. and it doesn't mean that, there aren't students sort of maintaining, but oftentimes it can be kind of, challenging to go from sort of that level 3, which the state defines as being moderately developed, to that level 4, which is well developed. So, oftentimes there can be that struggle to get our students past that plateau, if you will, and really push.
Eric, I have a quick question about that. In the LPAC, I know that they, children get classified or reclassified as far as their skill ability and every year regularly. Is this following a cohort? So, are we losing students who are jumping out of that?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, each year your cohort could shift. I mean, just based on matriculation or based on students moving in and out of the district. So we may have a number of students come in a certain year that are newcomers to the country and are, don't have any background with English. That's a possibility. So this isn't so strictly cohorted. Really, I think the key thing to do would just, be to look at the individual students because it's so unique to the individual kiddo.
So like comparing this to other districts in Marin County, that's not even a fair comparison?
Well, I think, what is mastery of English? I mean, that's what this is all about, acquisition, mastery, and I guess what you're looking at is how are we supporting these children to get to that place where they're proficient across those 4 domains. And so for each kid, that journey is going to be unique. We've worked very closely with districts around the county, San Rafael, Larkspur, etc. We've made a really important investment in a unified curriculum called EL Achieve. Our English language development teachers had a 5-day professional development to train up on this program. Other districts have looked at it, other districts are considering it, so we're all, in the same boat in terms of wanting to really have a cohesive program for all our students. But I think long and short is the pathway for each child is very unique. However, the desired outcome, of course, is to see that percentage of students making progress increase. So we want to see that go in the other direction. Credentials review, this is pretty straightforward. Our certificate employees are appropriately credentialed and they're assigned role, and we want to maintain that. Here, clicker. Okay, and then Mr. Carson with just a quick explanation of the expenditures as they connect to Goal 1.
Yes, so again, Goal 1 has to do with assessing student learning in math and EL, in ELD. And so what we spend our dollars on, first of all, is our refinement of district MTSS for academic support. So it's really looking at those services and improving on them, and we have staff that help with that process. And so we have budgeted dollars for them, and what we've shown here is just our expenses through the first annual, which would be through mid-year roughly. The other thing is develop a plan for accelerating learning and close any potential learning gaps. So again, having to do with that data, and then engage teachers in district-wide data review. So we're really looking at things like what Eric was talking about, MClass, DIBELS, iReady, those types of things. And so again, one of the things that, and it's a little initially when the governor introduced the LCAP and the idea of the LCFF and the LCAP back 2011, 2012, something like that, they really wanted to make sure that we weren't looking at this type of data and then to see it go full circle. We're having to now provide mid-year updates that go down to the budget level is actually kind of extraordinary, and it's a good step, but I just think that's kind of interesting that finally in 2024 we're looking at that level of data. And it's important because we also have to spend a certain amount of dollars from our LCFF for the children that derive the dollars, and specifically your unduplicated pupils and et cetera, and that's what these dollars are for.
Thank you. Okay, moving into goal 2, create a safe, equitable, and inclusive learning environment in which all students feel a sense of belonging, are respected and celebrated for their individual differences, and are empowered to thrive socially, emotionally, and academically. The Healthy Kids Survey, our first metric that we use, we give every 2 years to 5th and 7th graders. And so that's really key. It's also something that's required when as we did for 4 years, qualified for a state grant through the 2B, the Tobacco Use Prevention Funds, which were used for staffing programs. Anyway, so in 21, we saw 61% of 7th graders reporting difficulty maintaining focus on academics, and then last year that was 33%. So that's going in the right direction in terms of more ability to focus at school. So that's terrific, and we want to continue to see that progress. And
do you know what that was pre-COVID? Like, what was that in, like, say, 2018?
I'd have to dig in and get back into the Healthy Kids archive. But great question. And then we won't give Healthy Kids this year. We are going to be, probably in the next month or two, be giving our student and parent surveys, again, through the Panorama platform. Again, we're going to have, this will be our 3rd year getting data through Panorama, which is really exciting to really start to build that longitudinal trajectory to see how we're doing. And to, back to kind of Rachel's point, to really kind of start to follow some cohorts and understand, what's going on, et cetera. So we won't give Healthy Kids this year, we'll give it next year, but lots of the same questions around school climate, safety, are in Healthy Kids as we have in our Panorama survey. Suspension rates, you can see the percentages for 2022 and then for 2023. And this is all, again, reported on the state dashboard. So you'll see that there are certain subgroups for whom we might be a code orange, for example, meaning that, we need to see that percentage decrease. And so that is our desired outcome for this year, is to continue to see those suspensions decrease for students with disabilities and students of lower socioeconomic status, socioeconomically disadvantaged students by 3 points. And attendance rates, these, not that they're directly connected, but oftentimes we're seeing similar subgroups that, are being flagged in those two areas. 21-22, we saw 95%. Last year that dipped to 93, and then to date, sort of the 95% is around about where we are. So we want to kind of recognize and acknowledge that we're seeing some growth there. We're not quite back at that pre-pandemic attendance rate of 96, but we're getting closer. And I think all the conversations we've had in our RVSD updates and our Superintendent Council, we heard about it tonight. I think those are definitely having, I think they're getting to people, and people are understanding the importance of having their children in school.
I don't want to split hairs, but the number we got earlier was 94%, so we're at 95%.
So I don't.
At the time the report was run for this, we were, but a couple of, at least 1 month more has come down. And so what we do know is we always start the year with a higher attendance rate, and as the year goes on, it declines. So even when we did our first RVSD updates to families back at the end of November, we were at a higher attendance rate, and so we've now done 2. But I think just based on Superintendent's Council reporting of parents there who didn't read the updates, we're going to push them out through the school site newsletters. Because we've done now two rounds on this, but it does decline over the course of the year. And so Chris has already adjusted the budget as an example based on the continued decline as we've gone through.
And help me understand that percentage. Is it the average over the year, or is it that a point in time at all times too? I mean,
No, actually what you do is you take the number of days that the students that you have enrolled are eligible to come to school, so the total number of school days for them, and then look at the number of days they actually attended, and you get a percentage. And so it
For that
counts
month
specific attendance for every single child. So if a child comes mid-year, they can't qualify for 100%
right.
ADA because they haven't been there.
Okay, so I guess what I'm asking is, I'm just trying to figure out how that number's calculated. Is it on a year? Is it on a rolling basis, or?
It's on a monthly basis.
It's on a monthly basis.
No,
Okay.
it's an annual basis.
It's an annual basis.
Yeah.
In terms
You
of funding,
In terms of funding.
Yeah, you annualize it.
Okay, so it is
Yeah.
averaged out.
But we can determine what it is at any given point during the school year.
Right, because you can take that point in time and see how it's going.
Right. And I mean, one thing that we heard in Superintendent's Council was some ideas about, hey, we see in our understanding things like the educational impact, the wellness impact, the physical impact of having decreased rates, all of which are true. But what about like when we see improvement, like how can we message that? How can we tell people good job, and throw some confetti at them, which we should. Okay, moving on.
But can I ask one question too about the suspension rate? Are any of those numbers repetitive, or any of the, for example, 6.1 Hispanic students in the 6.7 students with disabilities? Are you double counting at some point, or?
Yeah, they're not unduplicated. I mean, these aren't unduplicated numbers, are they?
So the way that I think a rate is arrived at is number of suspensions, for example. So it could be the same student. It could be the same student that may have multiple instances of being suspended.
Okay, so those. Okay.
And there could be crossover between their race.
But the all students, 2%.
But yes, there could be crossover between race, disability, socioeconomic status.
We're just wondering, making sure I'm reading the numbers correctly.
And maybe this isn't the place for the question, but what is that from 2018? Like, is 2 out of 100 students? Is that a good number? Is that too high for a district like ours? Is it?
Well,
is it all John's fault at White Hill?
I'm sure if he was here in but I think so. And having through high school and middle school, been in that position to suspend a student or not. Educators understand that suspension in and of itself is not it is not the point. Like, the point is learning, and Ed Code is very specific about reasons that warrant suspension, and generally speaking, educators and administrators are understanding that for very serious safety considerations and other things, drugs, weapons, etc., that removal from school can be the most appropriate thing for that moment. And also too, there's a lot of creative things that school administrators and staff do, like they may have a removal from the classroom setting where some of these unsafe behaviors are happening, but they'll be in the office, they'll still be at school, they can see the counselor, they can get their special ed support. So rightfully so, suspension as kind of a, we'll just, sort of send them packing and they can come back later. We understand that that doesn't support all students. it can be grossly inequitable, and that what we are trying to do is make a change, a positive change to whatever behavior it is or situation is not going to happen by just sending them away. So of course we want to always see suspension rates decrease. However, it's
There may be things that go on in a particular year, but the goal is to overall decrease. And I think that's great information. Yeah, and to put with some things, that are happening, in our schools right now with more and more supports and resources, we should be able to hopefully be seeing the numbers decline over time. And the ultimate goal, as Eric said, is not having the child remain out of school, but it's the learning that can come out of it because of that growth, because we know kids make mistakes too. And so we hope that we can teach them, work with them, and empower them to make better choices as well.
The overall state suspension rate looks like it's about 3.5.
Yeah, and
state,
comparatively
on the dashboard.
Ed codes even changed, like the code K for disruption. Used to be just this fun catch-all where you could say, "Oh, you were disruptive," and we can suspend, and now that's not allowed, which and that's a good thing. That's a positive thing because again, you see disproportional impacts on certain populations through measures like that. That's easy to see across the board, and we I think are working really conscientiously, and I would say that the administrators across the county, our White Hill Middle School team is connected with a countywide consortium of other middle school principals, and these are things that they all are talking about because they are all part of that holistic set of practices to support students, and not just as individuals but also as a campus. And sometimes it is the right thing to make sure that the campus is safe by having a suspension come down. Okay, moving to the fiscal piece for LCAP Goal 2.
Yes, and so again, it's to create a safe and equitable and inclusive learning environment in which all students feel a sense of belonging. So as you look at it, our expenses are for things such as elementary counselors and our MTSS coaches. Again, MTSS coaches, they're looking specifically down to the student level and looking for things and tracking their academic and other barriers to their success so that they can provide the supports that are necessary. And so that's one of the major categories. And then we're doing other things such as looking at Orton Gillingham training, foundations training for phonics instruction, and a math conference is similar. And so you see all of those expenses that we have, and we do have one that we've spent over what we had estimated initially. But again, these are mid-year expenses.
Thank you, Chris. And then the last goal, engage in a continuous cycle of collaborative input and feedback involving colleagues, students, and parents, guardians on the climate and learning experience of all students. Of course, we talked about the Healthy Kids surveys before. Our panorama surveys, again, have been really exciting to year over year really get a better understanding. School climate, school belonging, and you see those numbers might oscillate a little bit year over year. Of course, we're always looking to see that increase. Middle school, the numbers are lower than elementary. I gave these exact kinds of surveys when I was 6 years at the middle school in Larkspur, and I think it's very expected to see that for middle school age students, they're going to have a little bit more of a critical lens on school climate, on their relationship with adults. So I think that's to be expected. But of course, it's always the goal to really take this and forge ways by which students are feeling more connected and recognized and acknowledged and involved, and for staff to find those unique ways to connect with them. The middle school has all kinds of really unique approaches to that, from all their spirit teams and their lunchtime competitions, staff, student soccer, basketball, what have you. And they're also building these student leadership teams, the student wellness ambassadors. That's another countywide effort, and Ross Valley is a part of that cohort, and those kids are kind of getting trained on how to be sort of like peer resource sort of wellness educators. It's really cool. And they had their countywide meeting at White Hill. That was back in the winter, if I'm not mistaken. So I hung out there for a little bit to see that taking place. And there's also a connection being forged with the SLAM students at Archie, Student Leadership Anti-Racist Movement. And so there's a cohort getting built at White Hill as we speak. So that's really exciting to see these different avenues by which kids can get involved and make a contribution. So, and Mr. Carson.
In terms of the expenses, one of the areas that we spend our dollars on has to do with Panorama Education. Panorama Education is that survey that we would put out to the school community, so it's students, staff, parents, guardians, and looking for that feedback that we can then utilize. And then another thing that we're spending our dollars towards is the meetings with parents, and so providing different ways to be able to draw those parents in. So we're looking at things like if we have to provide food, if we have to provide childcare and translation services, looking for ways to be able to really involve the community more.
Nice.
So.
Quick question on this one, for the budgeted expenditure, the $34.95.
Yeah.
That's what we paid at the first year?
That's what we have estimated annually. This is generally done near the end of the year. So that's the reason you have zero at this particular point, because it's just paid once a year.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Chris. And so again, as I mentioned earlier, we're starting to build momentum towards developing a new 3-year LCAP, developing and refining goals around those 3 big areas: academic progress and achievement, student wellness, and community engagement, and then identifying those actions and metrics for each goal. And some metrics we know will continue, whether it's the Healthy Kids Survey, the Panorama Survey, but that's not the end of the road. We need to figure out additional ways to really find out how well we're doing on those different fronts. And then Julia put together a really great graphic that I think kind of capture really these big areas that we're working in. And of course, it's important to see those together because they are all connected. MS there on the left for priority standards, maybe you caught that, represents middle school for all the work they've done now in their second year with their teachers, identifying priority standards and then really building those proficiency scales to help students really understand what growth means towards those standards. And then just a cool kind of encapsulation of all the different avenues by which we are, thank you so much, teamwork, where we are getting input and feedback through Superintendent's Council, our DLIFE, that's the teacher leaders that are doing a lot of heavy lifting, thinking about instruction and learning, our DLAC for our multilingual parent community, and our students. Any questions, comments? That concludes the presentation.
Thank you.
I'll pass pass that on to Julia.
This is what we should be spending our time on, right? This is like so critical.
Just remember when you get that survey, right?
Fill it out.
What do you do? What do you do with it?
Complete it.
You fill it out. Fill it out. Yeah. Take that time. Thank you in advance.
Fill it out every year. And I get to hear about my kid at school filling it out when she has to do it too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. I think I asked my questions along. Does anyone else have questions? All right. So there's no public to go out to public comment for, so unless there's any further discussion about this. I am grateful because I know that this, you know, it's an 11-page slideshow, but there is a lot of effort that goes into this LCAP. It's a lot of reaching out to the community. It's a lot of talking to people. It's getting people to fill out surveys. So as quick as this was, it takes like several people and a lot of time and effort to get those things pulled together. So I am grateful to Julie, even though she's not here, and for everyone else who participates because it's a lot of work to get that done.
Thank you.
All right, so that's just information and presentation. So we shall move on to our next item. Our next item is consent action. Unless anybody has any questions or wants to pull anything out for discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
We'll move consent.
Okay. I have a motion, of a second?
No second.
Motion and a second. Ryan?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Daniel?
Aye.
Shelley?
Aye.
Rachel? Aye. All right, so we have approved our consent actions. We have board business, committee updates and reports and announcements by trustees.
Recommended approval of
Did I
the
miss something?
school safety plans.
Oh, that was under the consent actions?
It's all done?
All in one
Those are-
motion, yeah.
Okay, all in motion, just making sure.
Yeah. So committee updates and reports and announcements from trustees. Anyone have stuff going on they want to bring up?
The Sacramento trip was fantastic. I referenced it a couple times today, so if anybody can go next year, it was exceptional. Met some good people across Miller Creek, Larkspur, Corte Madera, some other trustees, but also to be with Senator Mike McGuire, the free lunch people, the Universal Schools meal, they spoke. They got a lot of feedback. The LAO was there, that guy Ken spoke again. It was great. It was excellent. So I couldn't recommend it enough. And I wonder how we get our community members to see things and to attend with us as well. Based on one of the public comments, like how do we help our community get more involved? So I wonder if there's things that we could be doing to not just the school board, but hey, community members, let's go. Marin County, Ross Valley School District, Marin County Office of Education. Parents, let's go for a day. Because it's the same amount of time for the speakers, just a bigger room. Might be something, I don't know if that's possible or feasible, or I could talk with MCO who sets it up, but
I don't know how it gets set up or if there's like certain days allotted or, however, but we can certainly look into it and learn more.
no, I'll look into it. You've got enough to do.
Thank you. Do teachers' unions have Sacramento Day?
I don't know.
I don't know if if there's a way of gathering together for legislators to hear from those.
I will say that oftentimes, and I'm sorry to interrupt, oftentimes the legislators make themselves available for local school districts and or the bargaining units. I've had the opportunity to do that for a past district, and I got to meet the local legislators at that time. And part of that meeting ended up, you heard me talk about the irony of the budgets, having to show the budgets in the LCAP. My local legislator at that time, who's now the Secretary of State, Dr. Shirley Weber, her daughter actually pushed this forward. And that was part of the conversation, is that very subject at that time. And then I also had an opportunity to meet our local state senator at that time. And nothing happened, but there was, about a year later, there was an issue related to school transportation. And I contacted his office, and I was able to work with him to get the legislation pushed forward immediately to change law for a short period of time. So those are really important meetings. And you can get meetings separate apart from them as well. They just, as long as you keep them to short periods and have a specific topic, you can often get through what you need to.
Good enough. Would you like me to send you the websites for both of our legislators?
No, I got it.
You have it? All right.
Yep.
Okay.
I did not go to the YES board meeting. I will let Marcy cover that because I was here for our board meeting, for our special board meeting. But I did earlier in January, I did a board president's workshop from CSBA. It was an all-day workshop online, so it was fantastic. I would recommend it for whoever is sitting as board president. It's a very good thing to do at the very beginning. It put into perspective how dysfunctional a lot of boards are. I am very grateful for our board because the people that were in my multiple groups that I was in throughout like the 8-hour day, the stories I was hearing were kind of just mind-boggling. So I am grateful that we are able to work in a productive and respectful manner with each other. But anybody, honestly, if you're an aspiring board president, if you are sitting in this role in the future, I would definitely recommend it. It was one of those ones that I think is worth it for the time that I spent. Worth a vacation day to do it. And I also went to a performance. I'm trying to remember which. There was a music performance I went to. There were actually a couple. There was one for orchestra, and then there was one for band. I just don't remember the exact time. It's been a while, but they were great. And I posted pictures of them. They were packed.
I went to the 5th grade White Hill band performance, and it was my first experience hearing the 5th graders collectively play as opposed to my son doing it by himself. But I think the most amazing thing was when they said, okay, now let's go to the upperclassmen. And that first note, we all were like, whoa. And I think it just speaks volumes to the staff and the music teachers and their commitment to really fulfilling our children's lives with that teaching of music, the band. I was incredibly impressed. And so were the 5th graders that realized that they could actually sound like that in a year or two.
That's cool.
So kudos to the YES Foundation and to the teachers and all of the students that go and put on those shows. We also had our Parent Equity Guardian Task Force meeting since we last came together. There's been a bit of a positive shift, I think, in terms of moving forward. We have some new members and also existing members, so we're looking to really have a more focused, task-oriented process, which means that 2 committees were formed out of the existing parent group. They are meeting separately and coming together and addressing some questions about what the word task means and what we're going to do going forward. So it'll be interesting to see how that matures and how it's going to go to the next level, because a lot of the work and building and getting to the place of getting the equity policy in place and just building rapport with parents and creating this group for people to come to has been most of the work from the beginning of this. But we're now at a place where I think people are ready to roll up their sleeves and say, what can we do collectively and at our sites to really demonstrate that we are bringing equity-focused events and equity focus even into the curriculum and classrooms and experiences at the schools and sites. So that was, I thought, was a positive experience as well. I can't think of anything else that I've been privy to, but I think that's it.
What else? Okay. All right, so moving on, the Board of Trustees draft calendar of meetings for 24-25 is up for us to review and vote on. So, where's the?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay.
There's nothing
Really what we did in
They can
trying
only
to.
change, it's not locking you into
No,
anything.
and
Yeah.
what we did is we just focused on ensuring that the board meetings weren't like coming right off of a break, one of the non-school daytime breaks, because what that means is during the break, the agenda has to get posted, so it limits, especially with Teresa being a 10-month employee, roughly 11 months almost, is it allows, less time, so she can truly take her time off.
Gotcha.
So that's what we tried to do with this calendar, then keeping in mind some of the statutory timelines that we're under, as well as just other cycles that we go through, so.
Yeah, I think the dates look fine. I'll second the motion.
Great, thank you.
I have to make her my birthday. All right, Ryan?
This time it's yours.
Chris?
Aye.
Shelley?
Aye.
Daniel?
Aye.
Rachel? Aye. All right. And then we have several board minutes to approve, to go line by line, because not everybody was present for all of these meetings. So for the
I'll
approval
make a
of
motion
regular.
to approve the November 15th minutes.
Okay, I will second it. So Ryan?
Aye.
Rachel? Aye. Shelley?
Aye.
And Chris?
Aye.
Daniel, you weren't here, so I don't, do you want to abstain?
Just abstain.
Okay. All right, the next ones are the approval of the regular minutes for the December 13th, 2023 meeting.
So moved.
Ryan, you were not here for that meeting.
Yes, you were.
Yeah, it was.
You were, no.
No, you and Chris were both gone for that
You
meeting.
were gone. I had surgery.
Copy that. I'll withdraw my motion.
All right, I'll move that we approve them. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, Rachel, aye. Daniel?
Aye.
Shelley? Aye. All right, so.
Abstain.
Okay.
Do the roll
And
call
Chris?
vote.
Abstain.
All right, thank you. Just a different experience for me. Okay, so approval of the special meeting minutes for January 18th, 2024. Everybody was here for that, so do I have a motion?
So moved.
All right,
Aye.
give it a second. I need a second first.
I'll second it.
Okay. All right, so
Oh, sorry.
Ryan?
I meant second. I am so tired.
It's okay, no, I know, me too. I'm also, so Daniel, you seconded.
Aye.
All right, Chris?
Aye.
Shelley? Aye. Rachel? Aye. All right, so those ones are approved. The approval of the regular meeting minutes for January 31st, and Ryan, you were here late, so, but you were here for that, but just late.
So moved.
All right, second?
Aye.
All right, so Chris?
Aye.
Daniel?
Aye.
Shelley?
Aye.
Rachel? Aye. And Ryan?
Abstain.
All right. Approval of special meeting minutes for February 13th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Ryan?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Daniel?
Aye.
Shelley?
Aye.
Rachel? Aye. All right. Approval of special meeting minutes for February 21st, 2024.
So moved.
I'll second it.
All right. Ryan?
Aye.
Daniel?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Shelley?
Aye.
Rachel? Aye. All right, so those are all done, and now we have H Superintendent and Cabinet reports.
All right, given the hour and that we have closed session still to go through, we'll start, Chris. Nothing from CVO, all right, and Eric, Director of Student Services.
Nothing to report.
All right, thank you, and just give a quick update just on the YES meeting, Rachel, because you mentioned that. So what one of the things that did occur at the meeting was they talked about their spring fundraising campaign, where they're looking to, by the end of April, is to raise another $270,000. They're definitely making progress on their fundraising goals, so that's great. And then they talked about their upcoming activities and events, like Battle of the Bands. So, and this year it's going to be held at the Elks Lodge, which can, it should cost less to put it on because it doesn't require the transportation, so it should be better, more well attended, in other words, because they don't have to worry about getting the transportation out to the venue. and they're locking down all of the bands that will be or locking in.
All the bands will be battling.
And it's not really a battle, which they talk about, but it's great. And then they just have one of their parents who's on the board, Victoria George, who was a student of mine back in the day at White Hill. She does have her own band, and so she often plays. So she does kind of parties with a purpose and other different kinds of events that she'll perform at in her band and give the proceeds to the Yes Foundation. So they're also looking to create some structures within their board itself, just to be sure that is kind of like what Parent Guardian Equity Task Force is working on too, around a subcommittee work that is making sure of how to onboard when new folks come on board. And so how do you help them get into those new roles without having to have the institutional memory of that organization? So they are moving along, and Chris, you covered the Parent Guardian Equity Task Force. I'm going to leave it at that for tonight, so thank you.
Did you? Yeah, so for them, they've got these two things going on this month.
Oh, yes, the Perry's fundraiser, February as well as March, and they have Victoria and the High Lonesome, which is Victoria George's band, and then in March is Les Minivans, who also now, I think they're going to be performing at Battle of the Band. No, they have a new band out from West Marin. Forget the name of it, though, who is engaged in that also.
And there's two Dine and Donates with new business partners, Baked Blooms and Garanghelli's Pizza, and those are on Tuesday, next Tuesday. And then,
Tuesday?
Yeah, and Garanghelli's for every Tuesday for the next 3 months.
Great.
So then that'll be out in the school newsletters and everything too, but
Okay.
that's an important one to have on there. Sorry to interrupt yours.
Nope, that's just fine. Yep, there it is.
Okay.
Didn't get to the last slide.
No more dates. So with that, it is 9:41. I'm going to move us into closed session. There is no public here to comment on our closed session agenda items. Our closed session is going to be conference with labor negotiators pursuant to Government Code 754.957.6, all employee groups, CSEA, RVTA, confidential classified management, certificated management. And at 9:42, I will move us into closed session. All right, it is 10:26 and we are reconvening back in open session from our closed session. There is nothing to report out, no action was taken, and it is 10:26. I am going to adjourn our meeting now.